Chapter 1538. What did I see? Is it the truth? Chu Feng's soul was pounding. Both his body and heart were trembling. There was a creature on the other side. He had truly seen it. It was definitely not an illusion. But now his eyes were in great pain. He couldn't endure the corrosion and could no longer stare. His eyeballs were being torn apart by an indescribable substance. At the end of the road, there is no eternity to be seen. There are withering experts. Chu Feng seemed to be sleep-talking as he tried his best to remember everything he had just seen. It was a blurry and hazy scene, but it was incomparably important. He knew that this was related to the future of the Pollen Road and couldn't be forgotten. However, even though he had two eternal venerables, his memories were also disappearing and about to explode. It was hard to imagine what kind of domain this involved. Why? His mind was completely blank. He was at a loss. He was being targeted even with a single glance. Had he been cursed? It was as if he was about to lose himself. Not only his memories, but even his own existence couldn't be guaranteed. Even he himself was about to disappear along with those memories. No! Chu Feng clenched his fists and roared. How could it be like this? What exactly was it? There was an unforeseen event on the Pollen Road. The problem was at the end. He saw a portion of the truth, but he was corroded and couldn't remember anything there. He could see that Chu Feng's body was becoming faint. It was just like what he had seen, extremely unreal and hazy, as if it was about to scatter in the passage of time. His body had become indistinct and would no longer exist. How terrifying was this? It was as if he had never appeared in the first place. It was as if he had never existed in this world. All of this was too frightening and unimaginable. Even the peak experts among true immortals, as well as the great universe-level existences who had reached the end of their decay, would be horrified after seeing this scene. They would turn around and flee in fear. Otherwise, even those existences would find it difficult to break free. They would return to the haze and desolation, falling apart in this world. At the critical moment of life and death, at the most difficult moment of survival, Chu Feng encountered a person, the one Jiu Daoi spoke of. Regarding that person, no one mentioned his name. He gradually became indistinct in everyone's memories, disappearing year by year as if he had never appeared. And in front of him, at the end of the road, there was another creature that caused Chu Feng's memories to be obliterated. His mind was blank, and even his body was blurry. He was on the verge of dissipating. Were they the same species? Chu Feng saw a creature of this level, and because he was facing it himself, the problem was even more serious. He was going to die. This type of death was extremely lamentable. It could be considered eternal silence, and even the traces of the past were erased. Even those who knew and were familiar with him would forget him. This was too sad and incomparably desolate. It was as if he had never come to this world. He had disappeared from everyone's memory and was erased. Even if he died, no one would know. It was hard to imagine what kind of existence he was facing today. At this moment, Chu Feng's figure was indeed fading in the minds of many people all over the world. He was about to disappear. This was an extremely terrifying change. A memory about a person was actually going to disappear into thin air and become blank from then on. If one understood the truth and jumped out of this strange circle to examine and observe this kind of change, who wouldn't be afraid? Even fallen true immortals would feel their hair stand on end. Clearly, someone had sensed this kind of terrifying change. For example, those who had a close relationship with Chu Feng immediately felt that something was wrong. In the quasi-mortal race, Ying Xiao Xiao, whose long silver hair hung down to her waist, had a slightly perplexed expression on her lustrous face. She murmured, "Strange, what's wrong with me? My heart feels empty, as if something incomparably important has been cut off. It's very uncomfortable. I want to grasp it, but I can't. I seem to have lost something." Roar. In the exotic wasteland tiger race's Remnant, Tiger Dong roared and clutched his head. The corners of his eyes were about to split open as he panted heavily and roared. What happened? There's a gap in my memory. There's a period of time where a very important experience has collapsed. I can't connect it. In the Two Realms battlefield, Zhouxi's face was pale. She had a premonition of something and felt an intense uneasiness in her heart. Chu Feng, is that you? What's wrong with you? I feel like you're going to disappear from my memory. Why is it like this? That was because she was thinking about Chu Feng's matter. He had just left not long ago, so she still had some impression of him. However, he was also about to be erased. She was terrified and scared. What's wrong with you? Why are you disappearing from my world? Did something happen to you? Zhouxi cried. She came from a sixth clan in the Yang realm and knew far more than ordinary people. Naturally, she had heard of that person's situation. But now, even Chu Feng was about to disappear from her memory. He must have encountered something unimaginable. No, she was uneasy and scared. But in an instant, she discovered that she had no impression of anything. Even a name she had just shouted was so unfamiliar. I lost something incomparably important. My heart hurts so much. I can't remember. Zhouxi cried. She blamed herself, was anxious and worried, and was afraid because of this. That was a person. I can't remember him. You come back quickly, she cried. There were many people who were more powerful than her, and they all revealed expressions of shock because they were also affected by the shock waves. The more powerful a creature was, the longer they could persist. Even though the difference wasn't that great, they still had some impression of it. For example, Old Gu and his old rival Zhou Bo, a great origin realm expert, were all trembling in fear. They could clearly feel that their hearts were emptying. Chu Feng, why are you so hazy? Are you going to disappear from my mind? Old Gu was scared and his face was deathly pale. Zhou Bo's expression suddenly changed. He didn't know what was going on. Had he become muddle-headed from his old age? Why did such a person have to disappear from her heart? Chu Feng is gradually fading from my memory. I'll never see him again. The Qin Luoyin of the past, the Qin Yin of today, stood on a mountain peak. She was puzzled and disappointed. She stretched out her hand and streaked through the air, but there was nothing. The strange dragon's face was full of bewilderment and fear. He felt that a part of his life had been cut off. He didn't know whether he should be glad that he was free or let out a long sigh. Who's Chu Feng? But moments later, Old Gu was also at a loss. He couldn't remember Chu Feng's identity and origins. Even this name was unfamiliar. Are you talking about Chu Feng? Zhouxi was sad. She knew that she seemed to have forgotten someone, but she didn't know who he was. Now that she heard Old Gu's whisper, it was as if she was grasping at the last straw. She tried her best to remember, but she couldn't do it. Her cultivation was far too lacking. I don't want to give up on you. I want to remember you and appear in my world. Zhouxi sobbed. Sparkling and translucent tears continuously rolled down her snow-white cheeks. Even the martial madman revealed an odd expression. He was rather surprised and looked down at a certain part of the void. Interesting. I've always heard of that person in the serene realm. Now he's actually becoming hazy and about to disappear with the wind. What did he encounter? Could it be that he couldn't bear the scriptures and treasures left behind by that person after being touched by him? One's body is about to cease to exist like in the legends. What kind of experience is this? The martial madman pondered. Even his memory was becoming hazy. Information related to that person was about to disperse completely from his heart. He knew what this meant. That person was about to die. Moreover, if nothing unexpected happened, that person would be silent forever. All traces of him would be erased cleanly. He had heard of this kind of legend before. After all, the martial madman had experienced an extremely long period of time and had come into contact with many unspeakable secrets. Chu Feng, is that you? Yao Yao raised her head. Her spotlessly white chin was slightly tilted upwards. She looked somewhat stubborn. She had always been very confident. In her early years, she was known as the #1 under the starry skies. In addition to her exceptional beauty, it could be said that she was peerless in the eyes of the world. But now, she revealed a worried expression. She couldn't remain calm and composed anymore. She stretched out her fair and delicate fingers and touched the void. What she saw was different from others. She could actually see spirits just like Chu Feng. She saw luminous particles fluttering like candlelight. A large amount of them flew up and flickered indefinitely. Among those spirits, she seemed to see Chu Feng's face. He was formed from spiritual particles and was currently going into the distance. He was on a path of no return. 3 emperor techniques combine into one. Heroic spirits illuminate the past and present. Yao Yao quickly chanted in a low voice and stretched her body. Her lotus-like arms streaked across the void, and her feet took a bizarre path. She seemed to be carrying out an ancient sacrificial ceremony, yet also seemed like she was forming a seal and displaying a long-lost secret technique. This was very bizarre and odd. Her incantation and sacrificial dance combined and unexpectedly caused the space to shake violently. Fragments of time danced wildly in the air and resonated with space as if she was guiding something. Emperor Sacrificial Ceremony. At this moment, the Feather Emperor was startled and instantly moved. He suspected that he had seen wrongly. That woman actually knew this kind of lost sacrificial dance. What was she trying to do? Could it be that she wanted to summon a true celestial emperor? In Yao Yao's eyes, what she saw was different from ordinary people. It was a blurry scene. The spirits were like glowing dandelions withering in the night. They drifted away and went far away. She wanted to communicate. Xu Feng's body was fading and even partially disintegrating. He began to transform into light, candlelight, and particles. He became more and more illusory. His entire person didn't seem real anymore. It was just a hazy silhouette. His body and soul were throbbing. How could it be like this? I only saw a part of the scene, and it's going to dissipate. He was unreconciled. He had many unfulfilled wishes and too many people waiting to reunite and meet. He wanted to find the reincarnated ones, but now he was going to die one step ahead of them. What did I just see? A blurry scene emerged. At the end of the pollen road, there was a powerhouse. Although it was very hazy, it was definitely humanoid. It was that creature that had affected everything. Chu Feng tried hard to recall. He wanted to die knowing. At the end of the pollen road, that creature seemed to have died. It was lying on the road and collapsed there. Long hair covering the face, body covered in blood. Chu Feng raved as he recalled these scenes. This creature didn't intentionally harm him. It was just that he was too powerful. His own existence affected the stability and continuity of the entire pollen road. Is it him? The one number 9 spoke of. Before his heart was completely empty and there were still remnants of old memories. Chu Feng instantly thought of these things. Could it be that the source of the pollen road, the most powerful creature, was actually the same person as the 1-9 Dao he spoke of? Otherwise, how could there be similar intrinsic qualities? He got a little closer, and his memories were about to dissipate. Even his physical body was the same. However, the era didn't match, and the years didn't match. The two were creatures from different eras. Perhaps there's a path to find and a path to walk. Since that person doesn't belong to an ancient history, then they might really be the same person. Am I getting closer to the truth? I'm dissipating. Am I heading towards him? Chu Feng felt that he was going to die and disintegrate. His physical body was like smoke and mist. He was getting closer to the heavenly mode ahead. This was a road of no return. However, he also had an illusion. It was like some kind of ritual, and he was about to return. In a split second, he heard some sounds. Those were the sacrificial sounds of the ancestors. Was it some kind of call? He was going to be muddle-headed and die. Soon, he was going to fall apart. However, at this moment, it was as if a dazzling spiritual light streaked across his eyes. He had some enlightenment. Death wasn't the final destination. Was this just the beginning? He seemed to see golden spears and armored horses, and he heard shouts of slaughter shaking the heavens. Was he going to fight after death? For a moment, he was at a loss. Where was he going? Chapter 1539. The sacrificial voices of the ancients were coming from an unknown place. Although they were distant and even intermittent, they gave off a grand and desolate feeling. Was this a call from prehistoric times? No. Perhaps it was even more ancient. It was unknown which era it belonged to, but it was the prayers of the ancients and the tragic cries of millions and millions of creatures. Gradually, he heard the heaven-shaking cries of war, and he was approaching that world. In front of him, there seemed to be countless experts fighting. He could even feel the heaven and earth rending astral winds whistling past. Nearby, an incomparable great battle was unfolding. Chu Feng was a witness and wanted to participate, but his eyes couldn't capture those creatures. However, the sounds of war were becoming more and more intense. Vaguely, there were golden spears and armored horses, flames of war everywhere, and sword chi splitting all realms. Chu Feng felt that he was in the middle of the most intense and terrifying battlefield. But why couldn't he see anything? He seriously suspected that not far away, right here in the sky above and on the ground below, true immortals were as common as clouds, and divine generals were like rain. Blood dyed the firmament, and the battle was exceptionally bitter. His body was trembling, and he couldn't suppress the urge to fight for the ancients. It was because he could clearly hear the prayers and cries. They were extremely urgent, and the situation was extremely dangerous. However, he couldn't see anything. He tried his best to open his fiery eyes, but it was useless. In his blurry golden pupils, only blood flowed out, and he couldn't see anything. The sounds of fighting and prayers were clearly beside him. Those sounds became clearer and clearer, and he seemed to be standing in a grand battlefield, but he couldn't see anything. What was going on? He was a bit suspicious. Could it be that his body was about to disappear, and that was why he was hearing things? Chu Feng was very anxious and worried. He wanted to barge into that hazy world, but why couldn't he merge in? What's going on with me? In his impatience, he suddenly remembered that his soul light was turning into rain, and even his physical body was becoming hazy and about to disappear. I'm about to die, but not yet dead. That's why I haven't truly entered that world, and I'm only hearing things? In that instant, it was as if cold water had been poured over his head. Was he going to die? A portion of his memories surfaced, but there were also some that were blurry. He couldn't remember them at all. Who am I? Where am I going? Chu Feng calmed himself down. Then, he finally recalled quite a few things. He was evolving, stepping onto the true path of pollen. Then, he witnessed the creatures at the end. Then, his memories became blurry, and even his flesh was about to collapse. He was approaching the final truth. Chu Feng lowered his head and looked at his hands, then at his body. As expected, it was becoming more and more blurry, like smoke, like fog, on the verge of dissipating. Light particles continued to rise. I'm going to die. I'm going to fight in another world. With a pung sound, he collapsed. His body couldn't hold on any longer, falling onto the ground with his back facing the sky. His body grew dim, and countless particles evaporated. Chu Feng's consciousness wasn't clear, and he was at a complete loss. He discovered that he was floating. To be exact, countless specks of light were seeping out from his body. Is this the state of his spirit? It was just like when he saw those spirits on the true path of pollen. They were like countless flickering candlelight, like dandelions scattering in the darkness. Had he also become this form? He looked behind him. His fleshly body was about to completely rot in a short period of time, and in some places, even his bones were exposed. Am I really going to die? However, he still couldn't merge into the world after death. He heard the sounds of killing, but he still didn't see the struggling ancestors, nor did he see the enemy. Soon, Chu Feng discovered an abnormality. He had turned into a large expanse of particles, which were spirits, and they were currently wrapping around a stone jar. Was it this thing that prevented him from completely dispersing? Right now, he was in a spirit state, but he was still in human form. Who am I? I am Chu Feng. I want to remember everything. I want to find the truth of the pollen path, and I want to walk towards the end. However, he maintained this special state. He couldn't return to life, nor could he advance into the world after death. That was why when he turned around, he could see his rotting and blurry body, but when he gazed forward, there was only sound and no scenery. This was truly a situation where he couldn't advance or retreat. However, after a terrifying beam of light blossomed, everything was broken, and his strange and inexplicable situation was completely changed. It was as if a paper window lattice had been torn open before his eyes. He saw light, saw scenery, and saw the truth. That's the end of the pollen path. Only, that place was too dazzling. Endless light was released, and even he in his spirit state couldn't bear it. It was difficult for him to look straight at it. Within the terrifying beam of light, blood splashed out, causing the entire world and even time to fester. Everything was about to reach its end. He had only seen a corner of the scene, and everything in the world was about to end. Then, Chu Feng discovered that time and space were unstable. They were breaking apart, and the heavens were falling. They were completely dead. The problem with the pollen path was too serious. It was the source of disaster. There was a great problem there, and that was why all types of shocking changes had occurred. Even with the stone jar at his side, he discovered that terrifying changes were also happening to him. Even the light particles were dimming and compressing. Was he going to completely die? Was he going to enter the world after death? However, after one died, would there really be a special world in the pollen path? Soon after, he became a drop of blood, a ghastly red color. The stone jar accompanied him. Who am I? What am I experiencing? Or was it that he was witnessing something? Wang Long. Suddenly, there was a great tremor. The past, present, and future were all resonating, trembling lightly. The originally dead heavens and 10,000 realms, this world and beyond, all of them froze. Chu Feng discovered that both himself and the stone jar were trembling in response. Then he saw countless worlds. Time and space were no longer destroyed, frozen. There was only a single creature's blood. It turned into sparkling specks of light one after another, piercing through the endless time and space. It was to the extent where that creature's blood rushed to the end of the pollen path, stopping the source of disaster from spreading. There was a great problem with the pollen path. True blood had previously splashed out at the origin, and this was definitely not a good sign. And now, another creature erupted with bloody light, stabilizing everything, stopping the disaster at the end of the pollen path from continuing to spread. In the haze, Chu Feng seemed to see a person. It was very far away, very dim, and he couldn't see its true appearance. A thought flashed through his mind. Was that the one number 9 spoke of? The first mountain once hacked out a sword light. The aura of this blood is the same as that sword light. Chu Feng was very certain. That person's blood had once pierced through the endless time. Then, it was unknown whether it was intentional or not, but it blocked the disaster at the end of the pollen path, preventing it from surging out. At this time, many of Chu Feng's memories recovered, and he thought of many things. No wonder the creature at the end of the road made my memories disappear, and my flesh was also erased without leaving a trace. This level of existence is simply unimaginable. Chu Feng was overwhelmed with emotions. Was he witnessing history? The creature at the end of the pollen path was indeed a supreme expert of the same level as the 1-9 Dao he spoke of. It was just that the creature on the pollen path had met with an accident, and it might have died. I'm a drop of blood floating through the endless time and space, indirectly participating and witnessing. Is this related to them? Chu Feng suspected that he had entered this state after hearing the prayer, as if it was some kind of ritual. What did this mean? Could it be that he was related to the supreme expert? No, he was sure that he had only seen and witnessed a corner of the truth, and that it was not them. My blood is different from theirs. It has nothing to do with them. Chu Feng muttered to himself, and then he looked at the stone jar beside him. He was the blood attached to it, and it was the stone jar that brought him to witness all of this. The pollen path was too dangerous, and there were endless terrifying events at the end of it. There were accidents, and the 1-9 Dao he spoke of seemed to have unconsciously blocked all of this during the process of his own cultivation. In fact, when Chu Feng's memories recovered, there was a flash of inspiration, and he vaguely grasped something. What kind of state was that person in, and where was he? He seemed to have some kind of immature guess. Chapter 1540. He is no longer here, but the world seemed to be related to him. Chu Feng became more and more suspicious. His conjecture just now might be somewhat true, but he didn't want to continue guessing. There were too many things involved, and this place wasn't safe. He was worried that his thoughts would trigger something. Unfortunately, he wasn't that person in the end. Otherwise, he would be able to force his way over right now and rush to the end of the pollen path to see clearly and understand everything clearly. 1. All of the blood that passed through space and time shone resplendently. Then, it evaporated and disappeared into the distance. It wasn't that there were no changes. It brought about great effects. The great destruction and destructive energy of the pollen path were all worn down. The world stabilized once again. Chu Feng discovered that he had returned from a drop of blood and turned into a spirit. He turned into a mass of dazzling particles that formed a human figure that wrapped around the stone jar. At the same time, he discovered that he was getting further and further away from his physical body. His spirit was entering a strange space. Was that the world after death? Countless shouts of battle rang out again, resounding between the heaven and earth. Rumble. With a final tremor, Chu Feng completely lost his connection to his blurry physical body. He had entered a brand new world. It was just that the journey was a bit long. When he entered completely, the fighting had already stopped. All of the deafening shouts of battle had faded into the distance. It was silent, cold, and without a single sound. It was too abrupt. This change was very sudden, so fast that one didn't know what to do. Just now, there were still shouts of battle rushing into the heavens. But when Chu Feng truly entered this world, all sounds disappeared. He saw the scenery. The myriad heavens and myriad realms were covered in a ghastly red, like the last remnants of the setting sun amidst the endless burning clouds. What he saw before him was like a frozen scene. It was incomparably silent, without a trace of life. On the earth, it was a scene of doomsday. Was this a grand battlefield left behind by history? The sounds of killing and the prayers of the ancient people had long been covered in dust, restrained, and completely disappeared. On the earth, there were all kinds of rusted weapons and corpses everywhere. Was he late? Everything was over. In his perception, it seemed like only a moment had passed, but this place had already changed. Who knew how many years had passed? Many of the war chariots were broken, and there were ghost flames burning within. Great banners fell onto the ground one after another, dyed in filthy blood. Occasionally, a corner would be raised, immediately filling the air with dust. What rank were these withered corpses? Were there any great cosmos realm beings? Corpses were strewn everywhere. Were there true immortals, immortal kings, or even immortal emperors? The heavens were deathly silent, as if they had completely withered away. There was no life force between heaven and earth. Everything pierced through. There was no one who couldn't be destroyed. The existences high above also collapsed, falling, already growing dim, forever silent. Chu Feng raised his head and looked into the depths of the battlefield. He once again saw the scene at the end of the pollen road. This time, his memory did not collapse. He remembered seeing. There was someone there. That creature was bleeding. He did everything he could to watch. Even though he was in a particle state, a spirit, he was still affected, continuously backing up. Even the stone jar was rumbling, resonating endlessly with it. At the end of the road, the truth was revealed. The creature there had long hair that fell over her shoulders, covering her face. Her neck was snow white and delicate. She was lying on the ground, but one could tell that this was a woman. Moreover, that woman seemed to be incomparably beautiful. Chu Feng couldn't look straight at her. He could only give her a hurried glance. His spirit was on the verge of collapse again. The light particles all attached themselves to the stone jar. He no longer looked human, and then even more so fell to the ground. This place became quiet again. As for the end of the pollen road, large amounts of light particles also rose up. They were like fireflies dancing about, but also like glowing flower petals fluttering about, sparkling and beautiful. They covered that woman's figure. As for more of the truth, he couldn't see it from start to finish. Moreover, in Chu Feng's surroundings, in this deathly still battlefield, there was movement as well. It was no longer deathly still. Within the battlefield's earth, even within the dust, large amounts of light specks floated up. They were extremely sparkling, like the stars in the night sky, but also like gems on a black curtain, glistening and dazzling. Chu Feng shivered inwardly, feeling a bit horrified. It was because, in a split second, he saw too many people currently rushing over from the distance. They were all experts. It wasn't an illusion, not a misconception. They were in the distance, quickly approaching, to the extent where some people suddenly appeared before his eyes. He was inwardly shaken. Soon after, he somewhat understood what they were. Light particles floated up, falling like divine flowers, all of them releasing the light of dawn, incomparably dazzling. They fell on the dusky battlefield, suddenly turning into human forms. Were they all spirits? Chu Feng saw too many experts, all of them suspected to be spirits. A group of people dressed in simple and unadorned clothing. It was hard to guess what era they were from. Perhaps they were ancient people from millions of years ago, or perhaps they were ancient people from millions and millions of years ago. They were like departed spirits, but also like corpse puppets. They walked past his side, wandering about, heading towards the end of the pollen road. They wanted to head into the distance, to the place where the woman lying in a pool of blood was. Meanwhile, in front of the woman, there was a heavenly moat. Large amounts of ancient people actually silently fell inside, disappearing just like that, not even a single wave appearing. Are they formed from pollen particles? Are they all the heroic spirits of the past? What were they doing? Were they moths flying into a flame? Even though they knew they were going to die, they still wanted to head over. Large amounts of light specks appeared, extremely dazzling and beautiful. Chu Feng looked at the sky, full of light particles. They fluttered about in the darkness, advancing wave after wave, heading towards the heavenly moat. They turned into ancient people, turning into ancient people. Everyone advanced on foot, the clothes on their bodies in tatters. Without any expressions, their bodies withered. They didn't stop. Did they want to fill up that black heavenly moat? Chu Feng's spirit was trembling. In this type of state, even though he didn't have eyes, he felt his eyes heat up as if they were dripping with blood, but also as if they were crying. He couldn't help but want to follow over. Suddenly, there were several special elders who stopped, stopping, turning around to look at Chu Feng, as if they could see through time and space, seeing his true origins. You aren't quite the same as us. It's better if you go back. An elder spoke, his clothes in tatters, his condition extremely bad. You still have consciousness, able to see everything about me. Chu Feng was shocked. We are the losers, but we don't want to give up the last bit of heat. The spirit is still boiling. Go to the great disaster at the end of the road. Another elder spoke, his hair as sparse as withered grass, without the slightest luster. How could Chu Feng not be shaken? They were now spirits, ignorant and muddle-headed, but now they could look back and see his true roots. These haggard elders, how powerful were they back then? Don't go astray. The pollen path is the strongest path. In essence, you have to rely on yourself. An elder reminded, his eyes dim, his white hair stained with blood sticking to his aged face. Chu Feng's mind was shaken, and while sympathizing with them, he quickly asked for guidance. Did I go astray? Our true path. What opens and touches is the treasury within our bodies. What activates is the immortal within our bodies. It is ourselves. The elder with gloomy eyes spoke again, saying, It is only because the world's pollution is too great, the enemy's corrosion too severe, that we had no choice but to use a catalyst, introduce pollen, and only then did we forge this path. However, you must not put the cart before the horse. Do not blindly believe in pollen, mutant fruits. This is only a process, a method, an excessive path paved. If there is no pollution, we can activate our own immortal. The path we walk is the strongest. Chu Feng was shaken. Unexpectedly hearing this kind of teaching during this unexpected encounter left him greatly shaken. These were definitely the predecessors of the pollen path. The elders back then, they had even participated in opening the path. They were haggard, making others sympathize with them, feeling miserable and pitiful, but they were all unimaginably powerful experts. Do not give up on pollen either, after the world's pollution. It is it that brings hope after all. We are only reminding you not to rely too much, not to walk astray. You can use pollen. Another elder warned. They stopped for a bit, and then they were about to continue forward, heading towards the black heavenly chasm. Chu Feng quickly followed. There were too many things he wanted to say, wanted to ask them. Go back. An elder released a low shout. Senior, I still wish to consult you. Chu Feng quickly said. Another elder spoke in an extremely bleak manner, saying, Do you think we aren't willing to say too much? How many eras are separated us? We have already paid an endless price to speak like this. How many people can converse and interact with each other across so many great eras? No one can change the direction of history, or else the worlds will collapse. Nothing will exist. Suddenly, one of the elders noticed his stone jar. This artifact had the ability to conceal itself. It had disappeared for a moment under the noses of these peerlessly powerful elders, and it was only now that it was discovered. This sacrificial artifact is still here. It has been lost for a long time in our era. It previously carried our radiance and hope. Back then, it was it that brought seeds, brought pollen. Now is it still useful? Millions and millions of years have passed. Who knows how many great eras have passed? Perhaps it will develop intelligence, or perhaps it has tremendous origins to begin with, always having a spirit, just that we lost it, missed it, unable to analyze it back then. An elder was frustrated, reminiscing, in pain, his expression incomparably complicated. It's enough with us here. Don't throw your life away. Go back. We will work together to send you off. Several special elders were about to take action. They didn't hesitate to endure endless great karma, interfering with the past and present. It was clear that they wanted to protect Chu Feng. Suddenly, one of them woke up, saying, We didn't come here muddle-headed, your consciousness still present, having your own reasoning, not needing our help. Good. You are a descendant, proving that our path hasn't been completely cut off, our bloodline not completely extinct. There are still people here. It wasn't easy for you to come here. I hope you can go further when you return. Go further. Hurry and leave. Chapter 1541. Let's go back. The elders urged. Their bodies were haggard, their hair like withered weeds, their aged faces extremely haggard. When they looked at Chu Feng, there was hope, but also powerlessness, even more a bit of desolation and sorrow. They were also going to head on their way, destined to never return. They would part here, never to meet again in this life. Chu Feng could see a few things from their dim eyes. There was longing, but even more despair, extremely contradictory. Were they not optimistic about the future? They were full of sorrow. What exactly did they see? What was the despair for? Why were they so depressed? Chu Feng became vigilant. If there was no hope in the future, then should he personally experience those things? Even though he understood that they crossed who knew how many eras, many great eras separating them. These elders couldn't talk too much. Chu Feng still wanted to speak. Seniors, do you all have any suggestions before we leave? There are no suggestions. In reality, all methods are similar, different paths leading to the same destination. The highest realms are all the same, just that the names are different. For those who reach that realm, no matter what path they take, it is correct. Perhaps in the end, they will discover that everything is so familiar, as if it was just yesterday. An elder said quietly, his eyes dim. He waved his hand, about to go on his way. Seniors, are you not optimistic about my future? Chu Feng was extremely sensitive, always feeling that their eyes carried disappointment and frustration, their moods rather low. If they saw hope in him, it shouldn't end here, right? We're not boasting. We really are quite strong, but we still died becoming spirits. Meanwhile, you aren't bad either, but if you only reach our step, it is still not enough. An elder said with great changes. This was the same as pointing out many problems. How powerful were they? They might very well be the pioneers of the pollen path. These elders definitely dominated a period of time, unmatched existences of a certain great era. However, they still died, this enough to prove the severity of the problem. They believed that Xu Feng's talents weren't bad, unknown if they were truly praising him or if they were giving him confidence, saying that he might be able to reach their level in the future. However, this wasn't enough. An old man with blood-stained white hair stuck to his wrinkled face said, "You've only come as a spirit. If your physical body can also come here and feel us, perhaps there will be a few strands of hope in the future." His physical body came here. Xu Feng's heart trembled as he realized something. However, this was extremely difficult. Right now, his body was about to scatter, perhaps already rotting and disappearing, so he naturally couldn't reach this place with him. Moreover, wasn't this the world after death? Even a physical body could come here. The spirit is born from the flesh. If the flesh can cross here, then there will naturally be more hope. An elder spoke. Xu Feng was a little lost in thought. He had never given up on the exploration of the corporeal body. He had always attached great importance to it, and now it seemed that he hadn't made a big mistake. There were some ancient texts, some ancient books that recorded the soul crossing several realms, abandoning the flesh to depart. Moreover, they held it in high esteem, saying that the flesh was a shell, a relay station that could be changed at any time. From the looks of it now, there was a huge problem. It was impossible for the elders to speak without thinking. Since they had pointed it out, then it was of great importance. The spirit born from one's own flesh naturally had to be nurtured by oneself. If it was used as a relay station, as a guest house, one could leave the body at will, abandon it, change it. There might not be any problems in the short term. However, if one reached a certain level, looking at it from a transcendent perspective, this might be the most serious flaw. The spirit is born from the flesh. Xu Feng felt too much. It was to the extent where he believed that there was still a spirit in the flesh, taking root there. Meanwhile, the so-called roots were always there, able to nourish the spirit. The flesh is the root of the soul. Even if one reaches the highest level, there might still be some effects. Xu Feng asked probingly. The elders looked at him, not saying anything. In the end, they went on their way again, every single one of them in tattered clothes, heading into the distance, never to return. That path had no path of return, making one feel pity and pity. They were destined to die. This was a heavenly moat, destined to have no return. The pioneers of the pollen path actually ended up like this. Xu Feng watched from the distance, watching them leave into the distance, approaching the immeasurable dusky heavenly moat. Countless spiritual particles flew about, turning into soul shapes, forming groups after groups of ancient people, all of their clothes in tatters, making one feel the difficulty of their struggle and resistance, the bleakness and helplessness. It was to the extent where there were many small children in the troops, all of them dressed in tattered clothes, their little faces dirty, but their eyes were just that pure. Spirits, the children of the past, the children with outstanding talent, were actually also following along, throwing themselves into the black heavenly moat. Xu Feng was silent, remaining silent, quietly watching what was about to happen. Most people, most spirits, after entering the heavenly moat, turned into particles again, and then silently dissolved, disappearing, not even a splash appearing. Everything was just this terrifying. There were only a few special old people, and they made a particularly big commotion. In Xu Feng's current state, he actually didn't have eyes, but he could still see everything. Inside the black heavenly moat, creatures crawled out. It was because those elders were too strong, the disturbance they produced extremely shocking, producing black waves, wishing to smash through the heavenly moat, cross over. Was that creature human? It was startled out, its movements too fast, moreover extremely powerful, devouring time, chewing on great Tao order. Its face was pale like a ghost, unable to see sunlight all year round. It tangled together with an elder, hugging and biting. That elder's entire body was covered in bloodstains. His body suddenly ignited, illuminating the entire heavenly moat, illuminating the darkness. Countless particles spread from his body, cleansing the entire world. Pung! A large half of that creature's body turned to ashes, falling into the depths of the heavenly moat. However, the elder himself also turned into spiritual particles, eternally silent. During this process, the light the elder turned into moved countless spiritual particles, causing them to rise and fall. Then it attacked the entire world. Even Chu Feng's place was drowned out. Chu Feng was shocked. He saw the difference. The surrounding spiritual particles were illuminated by the light, all of them appearing in detail. Previously, he thought that all of the spiritual particles on the pollen true path were sparkling and pure, but now he discovered that there were actually terrifying patterns. Had they been corroded? He thought that it was only the human body that had been corroded, and even the soul light that had been polluted. Now, he actually saw that the spiritual particles on the entire pollen true path had also been corroded. There was a bit of terrifying imprint on every particle. This made Chu Feng's entire body go ice cold. No wonder this path was considered to have a major problem. How could he continue on this kind of path? Even the so-called true path had long since been corroded. However, some good changes were happening now. That elder burned, illuminating the entire world of the pollen true path. He was baptizing, purifying all of the spiritual particles. Following his own resplendence, he then declined and dimmed, all the way until he turned to ashes. The imprints on those spirits around Chu Feng, those special patterns were all baptized clean. Those spiritual particles were truly transparent like crystals, untainted by even a speck of dust. Upon closer inspection, there were no specks left, erasing the pattern imprints. Another elder moved, entering the heavenly moat without looking back. As expected, there were creatures crawling out again, locking onto him. This time, Chu Feng saw everything clearly. The elder was too powerful. He actually weaved all kinds of great Tao chains into clothes, draped with endless great Tao fragments, and bathed in a divine halo. The long river of time appeared beneath his feet as he crossed over. He was surrounded by the kiliocosm of worlds, as well as numerous old universes. There were also countless Tao patterns, as well as dense power of time. He traversed the river of time, and even though the various heavens were decaying and declining, he was completely unharmed. But after the creature crawled out of the heavenly moat, it still inflicted serious injuries on him. That creature had flesh and blood, but it wasn't a body of loss. Its face was rather pale, like a ghost corpse that had crawled out from an old tomb that hadn't seen sunlight all year round. Black blood flowed from the corner of its mouth, and its movements were too fast. It passed through the river of time and instantly made the elder's right shoulder disappear. Spirit blood rushed out from the elder's shoulder, and spiritual particles scattered, baptized the world. In the end, the elder killed that creature, but he himself also turned into light and attacked the entire pollen true path world, carrying out the most sacred purification. Meanwhile, he himself remained in eternal silence. In addition, the light he blossomed paved a path that extended towards the depths of the heavenly moat. The remaining 3 elders moved quickly, stepping on light particles as they charged towards the opposite shore. There were people who fought along the way and fell. In the end, they turned into light and purified the pollen true path, disappearing forever. There were also people who succeeded. Pung, an elder stepped onto the other shore. Without any other choice, he directly burned his spirit. What was he trying to do? Chu Feng didn't have eyes, but he still felt as if his pupils were contracting, and he was greatly shaken up inside. The elder himself turned into light and then into fire. Was he going to burn that woman? That was the root of the pollen true path. The most serious problem occurred at the end. He wanted to purify that woman. Endless spiritual flames burned, making heaven and earth and the void disappear, returning to silence. Chu Feng couldn't see clearly anymore, because he almost turned into a drop of blood again, attaching himself to the stone jar. This matter was extremely terrifying. The entire pollen true path had a fatal problem. Even the source had been contaminated, so how were those who came later supposed to continue? Did they have to open up another path and step onto another supreme, great Tao? Opening up a path, creating a method, walking down a completely different path. How difficult was it? Chu Feng's body was ice cold. Up until now, were all of his evolutions and the paths he walked wrong? Even the most frontline domain had a huge problem. Could he still continue? However, if he wanted to open up another path, it wasn't realistic at all. Suddenly, he recalled the elder's words. The end of the path, the final domain, was actually more or less the same. Different paths lead to the same destination. The supreme domains were interlinked. It was to the extent where the elder even said something indescribable. Once one walked into that domain, they might feel a sense of déjà vu, as if it was just yesterday. There is no need to force a different path, as long as one can refer to it, draw upon the true meaning. There are some ancient paths that have previously left behind traces. It is enough to pursue and verify their essence. Everything was quiet, but Chu Feng found it hard to calm his emotions. The elders had all died, and they would never appear again. Even though he knew that they were only spirits, their true bodies long dead, he still felt a bit uncomfortable. He just felt that the death of a spirit was countless times more serious than the death of the flesh. Even the spirits scattered, signifying true eternal silence. No matter how many eras passed, there was no way they could revive, never to be seen again. It was to the extent where Chu Feng saw that the path the elders walked was now different. The footprints along the way disappeared, the void cracks smoothed out, all traces erased. In the desolate battlefield, there used to be steels related to them, recording their lives. However, now, the steels weathered away, collapsing like dust. In the underground remains from many great years ago, there were mother golden books they left behind, secret texts that were passed down. They were actually also crushed into powder under Kakan noises scattering down. Near the heavenly moat, the earth the elders touched, as well as the heavenly moat void, and other things were quickly disintegrating, disappearing. Chu Feng broke out into a cold shiver. This was the result of the destruction of spirits? In a world that used to belong to them, nothing was left behind. Back then, the exceptional experts who had dominated countless eras, the true, unmatched creatures of the great eras, no traces of them remained in this world. It was as if these people had never appeared before. The pioneers of the past, the few founders of the pollen path, died in such a miserable manner, making one's heart feel stifled. What was even more frightening was that right now, even Chu Feng didn't know what the creatures behind the heavenly moat were, what their origins were, what their roots were. Everything was a mystery. Was it related to the sacrificial ground? However, he kept on feeling that the level involved was too high. If it was just a main sacrifice, it wouldn't be to the extent where the entire Pollen True Road would be in trouble, right? Even that woman collapsed at the end. Wait for me to fight. Chu Feng looked at the place where the elders disappeared. He couldn't help but roar lowly. I will accept this karma. The pioneers of the past, the founders of the Pollen True Road, how could they die in vain, even their traces mercilessly erased? With a boom, there was the sound of exploding thunder between heaven and earth. However, when he raised his head, he didn't see anything. In the unseen world, it seemed like some great karma really had landed on him. Chu Feng's spirit condensed into a human form, and his eyes also took form. His gaze was cold as he stared at the firmament. Even if everything were to fall upon him, and he had to bear it all by himself, so what? He had already experienced what he had to experience, and he had long since become fearless of everything. At worst, wasn't just death? Live, be strong, and sweep through all enemies. Chu Feng's body shone. The radiance of spiritual particles that blossomed was especially dazzling. Boom! Suddenly, 3 balls of fiery light reached the sky, burning fiercely, making the myriad Tao in the heavens rumble and tremble. Even the heavenly moat was the same, actually shaking. Then, Chu Feng saw 3 people sitting cross-legged in the beam of light that reached the sky, piercing through the long river of time. Who? Soon, almost in an instant, he thought of who they might be. The legendary 3 Heavenly Emperors. Chapter 1542. Heaven-reaching beams of light tore through the past and present, severing the long river of time, making the heavenly moat rumble, tremble intensely. What kind of situation was this? Within the 3 pillars of light, 3 indistinct figures sat there. Even though they were quiet and unmoving, it was as if they could crush the endless ages. How could Chu Feng not be shocked by this type of scene? He just had a feeling that these were 3 heavenly emperors. It was because he had seen fallen true immortals before, coming into contact with that path. He sensed the same source from these 3 great experts' bodies. Moreover, the 3 of them were the source, having similar auras. Only, the 3 emperors seemed to be seated high up in the 9 heavens. Their energy powerful, terrifying beyond compare, who knew how many orders of magnitude greater than fallen true immortals. It was just too intimidating. At the same time, he also saw abnormalities. Even though one of them released endless, terrifying energy, there was also a sea of death energy winding around him, spreading out through divine radiance. He seemed to have died. Above that person's head floated a great bell, seemingly familiar. Was that the Dog Emperor's master? Only, it was too far, so he couldn't be sure, unable to see it clearly. The other person was quiet and unmoving like a fossil, a bronze coffin before him, body like a withered tree, as if lacking vitality, but also as if in meditation, unknown as to what kind of state he was in. Chu Feng felt that this person was extremely astonishing. If he was unharmed, he should be extremely strong, to the extent where it could even be said to be ridiculously powerful, to the point of being incomprehensible. What kind of state was this person in? Chu Feng felt like this should be the heavenly emperor who appeared from the bronze coffin during the Soul River campaign. He wanted to see it clearly, but no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't. There was a sphere of mist around that person's face, always shrouding it, impossible to pry into it. Kings don't meet kings. Emperors don't meet emperors. Under this type of state, Chu Feng still couldn't help but mutter. Rather than calling it mockery, it was better to call it self-mockery. After all, he was still too far from that level. There was another woman who could only be seen dressed in white clothes, extremely indistinct, distant, aloof from worldly affairs. However, if one carefully sensed her, there would be a type of supreme pressure. She ruled the world, suppressing the world. This woman truly was impossible to gauge. There were countless great worlds behind her, all of them swirling around her. Some of the worlds were decaying, declining, but she was still bright and clean. However, even though she was sitting there cross-legged, her true spirit seemed to be moving further away. Was it about to enter a meditative state of cultivation, or was it also in a special state? Chu Feng was sure that, even though he had never seen her true appearance, he had definitely seen this woman before. It was in the special space within the Taishang Forbidden Area. There, the virtual body of the Empress was left behind after her transformation. The 3 Sky Emperors seemed to have come into contact with them, but they were too vague, and some of them might have been dead for a long time. Why did they appear at the same time? What were they trying to do? In the next moment, Chu Feng was shocked. He heard an extremely indistinct voice. It was very familiar, and also very far away. Who was it? 3 monarch arts as one. Heroic spirit illuminates the past and present. He actually heard these words. Someone was summoning the 3 emperors, displaying great might. How is this possible? Who could summon the 3 sky emperors like this? In reality, there were people who were even more shocked than Chu Feng. Everyone in the 2-realm battlefield saw Yao Yao's sacrificial dance and heard her mysterious incantation. Then, people saw a beam of light reaching the sky, as though some imprisonment had been opened. 3 indistinct figures appeared in the firmament. 3 emperors? Oh my God, who did I see? Are my eyes blind? At this moment, not to mention others, Even the fallen true immortals were shocked and trembling endlessly. Their inheritance originated from the three sky emperors, so naturally, they had some understanding. When these three indistinct figures appeared, they immediately understood who they were. The old experts on the scene were also shaken. People looked at Yao Yao and felt that this woman was too astonishing. What kind of secret technique had she used to communicate with the three sky emperors? Even the Feather Emperor's blood was boiling. How is this possible? The three sky emperors were about to appear. The martial madman was scared. This wasn't realistic. Some of the three had even died. So how could they appear at the same time? At the scene, everyone was like clay sculptures. Only in the end did some people whisper and shout intensely. They were incomparably fanatical. Are they really going to return? Then my big brother will have to tuck his tail between his legs. He won't dare to be arrogant anymore. Old Gu immediately mentioned his big brother and gave him a bad evaluation. In the coffin blocking the door in Yin province, a certain person almost made a move and almost went to the two-realm battlefield to cause trouble. True deities, celestial immortals, you summoned the three sky emperors. Long Dayu cried out strangely. He looked at Yao Yao and found her increasingly familiar. It was as though he had seen her somewhere before. The three emperors sat cross-legged high up and were extremely indistinct. However, their projections and the great Tao fragments they left behind were condensing and vaguely opening up a path. Or were they going to guide? This. Some people gasped. In particular, the fallen true immortals had the most complicated expressions. Now, they were convinced that this woman called Yao Yao had obtained the secret inheritance of the three emperors. She's the empress' only disciple? Or perhaps she's the common disciple of the three sky emperors, or even a core inheritor. Someone said, otherwise, how could it be like this? No one could summon the three sky emperors like this, unless one had an incomparably close relationship with them, and had obtained some secret spell left behind by the three sky emperors that far surpassed the laws. The sacrificial dance could summon the three sky emperors at the critical moment. Yet Yao Yao was displaying it without holding back. Normally, this should be a top secret method to save one's life. Now, she was trying to save someone. Yes, it's impossible for the three sky emperors to appear. It's their traces and their great Tao fragments condensing and illuminating together. They're summoned through the sacrificial dance. The martial madman came to a realization. Without a doubt, Yao Yao was saving Chu Feng and wanted to bring him back. She didn't know what had happened to Chu Feng's body. She only felt that he was fading away from her memory and was about to be completely erased. Even though Yao Yao was matchless and once had the reputation of being number one under the starry skies, she had no other choice but to display the sacrificial dance without hesitation. Is that you, Yao Yao? Where are you? In the world after death, the spiritual Chu Feng finally knew who the familiar voice belonged to. How could he forget it? It was Yao Yao. Then he saw the path back. It was the world where his corporeal body was. He walked step by step and was about to return. Thank you, Yao Yao. Even though he knew he should be able to return on his own, Yao Yao's voice could still be heard. It felt like she was saving him and made him feel warm in his heart. At the same time, he was pleasantly surprised and couldn't help but want to cry out. Yao Yao hadn't died. She had once been lost in the abyss, making him feel incomparably uncomfortable and pained. But now she had appeared. Chu Feng couldn't wait to see Yao Yao immediately. The three sky emperors shone with divine radiance. Even though it was just the condensation of their traces and the release of their aura, it still blossomed with astonishing power and opened up a path. So much so that at this moment, Chu Feng vaguely saw the blurry scene of the two-realm battlefield through the illumination of the three sky emperors in the sky. Yao Yao was really there. At the same time, he vaguely saw the martial madman who seemed to have locked onto Yao Yao. Was he going to make a move? Madman, what are you trying to do? Behind Yao Yao, the yellow-toothed old man berated. The energy aura on his body rose sharply. At the same time, Yao Yao stepped forward fearlessly. Chu Feng also saw this scene when he truly stepped out of the world after death. Chu Feng looked into the distance. His unknown form had yet to completely disperse. Martial madman, if you dare touch Yao Yao, I'll definitely beat you up. He didn't know if the two-realm battlefield could reflect a situation here, but Chu Feng still issued a declaration of war at the first instance. Then, he walked out completely and returned to his own world. Yao Yao has appeared, but there's trouble. The martial madman wants to make a move on her. Now, I have to advance a step further, become stronger, transform again, and then go to the two-realm battlefield. Chu Feng felt that he had to risk his life. He had to transform again here and become stronger. He didn't care about anything else. He had to evolve again in a short period of time. People need to force themselves. I have to go to the end of the pollen road with my corporeal body. Just like the old Pathfinders said, there's only hope. I'll definitely become stronger in a short period of time. Chu Feng was firm in his belief. Even though his spirit hadn't returned to his corporeal body, he already had an astonishing plan. I'll set a small goal for myself first. I'll start by beating the martial madman. Chapter 1543. If his kind of words were heard by others, they would definitely be regarded as the ravings of a madman. The relevant experts would definitely want to kill him. Since when did martial emperors become a unit of measurement? Since when did a martial madman become a small goal that others wanted to surpass? Chu Feng's spirit quickly moved forward. He saw his body lying on the ground, not far from the purple tree. Unexpectedly, the seed had sprouted and grown. The flower bud had bloomed for such a long time, but the tree had not withered. Although Chu Feng's body had not completely dissipated, his condition was very bad. His body was riddled with holes, and even his bones were exposed. They were dim, loose, and without any luster. As for his flesh, most parts had long since disappeared. In some places, only a layer of dry skin was left, and even his hair had decayed. Only some of his bones carried rotten blood and lacked vitality. No matter how he looked at it, it looked like he had been dead for a long time. This caused Chu Feng's heart to sink. However, he was not dejected, nor did he despair. The bones were still there, and there was still blood on them. Although they had decayed, there should still be a trace of spirituality left. In his opinion, perhaps this was an inevitable death tribulation, and he should face it calmly. The flesh is the root of the soul. I need to sense it carefully. The root has not been destroyed, and the spirit has returned. I can repay it. The spiritual particles in the sky were like fine, glowing sand, and also like ripples of time, falling toward the skeleton. His spirit had all returned. As expected, he felt a heavy sense of death. After the spirit returned to his body, boundless death, energy, and darkness drowned him. This dead body, he normally would not feel anything, but now he felt as if he had returned to his mother universe and formed a world of his own. This was his body, and this was the root of his soul. Now that it had returned, his original human universe was actually dead. It's not completely dead. There are still flames that have not been extinguished, and the root of the spirit is still dormant, waiting to be awakened. I must find it. For a moment, Chu Feng's spiritual light shone brightly. He chanted sutras, comprehended, and wanted to awaken the root in his body and revive the dead human universe. I saw it, I witnessed it. Even if it has withered and is almost completely dead, the withered root of the soul still remains in this body. It could be awakened. Chu Feng was shocked. In a trance, he saw a lifeless universe. When the desolate planets were densely arranged and falling, there was a ball of fire and a special root floating in the air. Of course, this was just a reflection of his spirit. In reality, he was just a skeleton. Boom! Chu Feng's spirit pounced over. Endless light particles surged, merging into that flame and entering the withered roots. For a time, the chanting of sutras continued without end. He was doing his best to revive his true body. He forgot about time and stripped away the influence of time. Only his spirit was undulating and recovering. In the end, his human-shaped soul light blossomed and his bones began to shine. After an unknown period of time, Chu Feng sat up. He lowered his head, feeling somewhat incredulous. His fleshly body had actually recovered. His finger was spotlessly white like jade, possessing great power. With a light tap, the sky was like paper pierced through by him. He returned just like that. His dead body has been resurrected. Even he himself felt that it was inconceivable and very strange. He thought it would be very difficult, that the process would be incomparably long, and that he might even fail. But he didn't feel anything. His body had recovered in a hazy, half-awake, half-ignorant state. Moreover, he was definitely a dual eternal venerable. Chu Feng raised his head and saw that the purple tree was still there not far away. It hadn't withered, which meant that it hadn't been too long. Unknowingly, he had quickly revived his body. The spirit is born in the body. This is an inseparable connection. The body isn't a relay station and can't be abandoned. Now, I verified that something I don't fully understand happened between my spirit and body. It allowed my body to come back to life in a short period of time. Chu Feng got up and arrived under the tree. He wanted to wait for it to wither and collect its seeds, but it still maintained strands of vitality and didn't die. When Chu Feng's body was revived, Yao Yao stopped her sacrificial dance in the two-realm battlefield. She knew that Chu Feng had returned to this world alive and had broken away from his previous terrifying state. At this moment, Zhou Shi's face was full of tears. She was excited, scared, palpitating, and finally happy. Chu Feng, you're back? I remember you. Her heart was in pain just now. She felt as though she had lost something. It was as though she had forgotten someone, but she couldn't remember who he was. He had been completely erased from her heart. Now, with Chu Feng's return, that figure reappeared in her heart. Yes. Old Gu drew in a breath of cold air. He was greatly moved and felt his scalp go numb. He was secretly speculating what Chu Feng had experienced. First, he disappeared and then reappeared. He could actually hide himself from people's memories. It was too terrifying. Long Dayu's expression was complicated. In the end, he looked up at the sky and sighed. Good people don't live long, while scourges last for centuries, just like me. Everyone present had complicated expressions. What they had just experienced was too special. What had Chu Feng, that demon from the lesser netherworld, encountered? He could actually appear and disappear in their hearts. The Feather Emperor, the martial madman, and the fallen true immortal had the most abnormal expressions. A certain creature could actually disappear from everyone's memories. The things involved were too terrifying, and they knew how terrifying it was. The martial emperor was the first to come back to his senses and locked onto Yao Yao once again. On a certain famed mountain in the Yang realm, the Qin Luoyin of the past, the current Qin Yin, was slightly lost in thought. Her lustrous and beautiful face had a somewhat complicated expression. What had the Chu Feng in her memories touched upon? Was it related to the supreme domain? I want to touch the Tao with my body and see the Emperor, Chu Feng whispered. Now, he only had one thought, and that was to become stronger in the shortest time possible. Then, he would go to the two-realm battlefield to find Yao Yao. He couldn't let anything happen to her again. The pioneers of the true pollen path and the elders had already hinted to him. He had to be brave and try. To touch the Tao and see the Emperor, he naturally had to feel the source of the creature, the mysterious woman who had fallen in a pool of blood at the end of the true path. But before he moved, he had to adjust himself to his peak and maintain his strongest state. Fierce runes were revolving and burning in Chu Feng's eyes. His fiery eyes spilled out an extremely bright rain of light as he gazed through the blue dome of heaven and into the outer realms. One day, there would be a world-shocking collision. There would be a great decisive battle between transcendent beings. The current him was far from being strong enough, and he yearned for power incomparably. Chu Feng walked into the distance and left the purple tree that hadn't withered yet. He stood on a tall mountain, his black hair dancing in the wind and his body taut. He was like a hibernating dragon in human form about to soar into the sky. Then, he threw the stone jar out. It drew an arc in the air and fell into a pile of rubble. Before touching the Tao, he was prepared to temper his body and solidify his foundation. He would charge through the barrier in his strongest state and see the Emperor. That Emperor was most likely an immortal Emperor. Crack! A beam of light as thick as a mountain appeared. It was like a burning planet smashing down as if it was going to destroy the world. In a flash, the mountain he stood on collapsed and exploded into fine powder. As expected, the heavenly tribulation immediately found him after throwing away the stone jar. Moreover, it was extremely powerful and violent. The lightning was as thick as a mountain. It was as if the end of the world had arrived. Last time, he had evolved into a grand Empyrean with 2 Tao fruits. Because he had the stone jar on him, he hadn't been found by the lightning punishment. Now he had gone one step further and possessed 2 eternal venerable Tao fruits. By throwing away the stone jar, he would naturally be found by the heavenly tribulation. He used his body to bear the lightning in order to complete what could be called the most powerful tribulation of this level. In the eyes of others, this was a great tribulation where he might die, but Chu Feng saw it as an opportunity and a baptism. From a certain point of view, Chu Feng was also a powerful being on the path of evolution in the Yang realm. At the very least, he had reached the pinnacle of his level and thus attracted the most powerful tribulation. Boom! The tall mountain was turned to ashes. Sand filled the sky as all life was extinguished. That place had become a land of death. All the aura of life had been scattered by the heavenly tribulation. Not to mention the plants. Even the energy particles in the void and the Tao law fragments were evaporated by this special lightning. This was a murderous tribulation. To be more precise, this was a heavenly punishment that specialized in killing the strongest beings in a certain field. Without giving them a chance, they would be completely destroyed. In the eyes of the laws of the world, this was a being that exceeded the laws and shouldn't exist. It should be erased. Up until now, Chu Feng hadn't even seen a true eternal venerable, but he was already a dual eternal venerable. Thus, how could this great tribulation not be terrifying? It could be called the most powerful heavenly tribulation of this era at this realm. Chu Feng endured it. Even though he was struck into a human-shaped skeleton, even when his bones exploded, he didn't let out a groan. He clenched his teeth and persevered. In the end, the thick lightning that filled the sky disappeared. Great tonic. Come again if you have the guts. I haven't eaten enough yet. He shouted. His body was broken and not in a human shape, but he still clenched his teeth in provocation. This was indeed beneficial to him. After his body was baptized, he felt that the rotten and ominous factors hidden in unknown parts of his body had decreased. He even felt that if this continued, he wouldn't be able to see his body rot even if he walked on the path of the universe. No, it's my misconception. Are you trying to know me? I've never seen a universe that hasn't rotted. So much so that there's never been a universe creature that walked to the end alive. He became alert and didn't let his mind be deceived. He saw through the truth. Very soon, Chu Feng recovered and reconstructed his true body at a speed visible to the naked eye. Tao patterns flickered within the sparkling and translucent body. There was a special halo that made it even more durable. In addition, his soul light was also baptized by lightning. It became increasingly powerful and sturdy as it emitted an immortal aura. Chu Feng disappeared in a flash. He changed locations and arrived under the purple tree. He wanted to touch the path with his body and enter that strange world. He stroked the stone jar with his hand and said, "Just what kind of roots do you have? You once brought hope and light to the true path of pollen and deliver pollen. From a certain perspective, your origins are even greater. I'll bring you to that strange world, the source of the pollen path. Are there any traces left behind by you there?" Vaguely, Chu Feng felt as if the stone jar had trembled a little. He sat cross-legged under the purple tree and began to comprehend the path. He muttered, "Lend me a hand and let us return to the source." Chu Feng began to experience a terrifying mutation once again. His corporeal body became hazy, but didn't dissipate this time. Countless light particles appeared and constructed the true path of pollen. He rapidly rushed up. During this process, the stone jar rang softly, allowing Chu Feng to capture a few scenes that were both real and illusory in the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint. Was a stone jar fleeing? Or perhaps it was witnessing that it was moving forward along some kind of trajectory and passing through one epoch after another. And those elders on the true path of pollen were just fated experts that it had unintentionally encountered along the way. It was too terrifying. It was too ancient and had once brought hope, light, and longing to those elders' race. A few blurry images flashed and then disappeared. Chu Feng stood on a dilapidated battlefield. There were no corpses or weapons here. Everything had decayed and vanished with the wind. Occasionally, he would see a mother gold sword. After being discovered and lightly touched, it would also turn into powder in an instant. Did I succeed? My corporeal body arrived here. Chu Feng's voice was trembling. This time, he discovered even more. A black heavenly moat stretched out before him, severing millions and millions of li of space. It even more so cut off time, making the so-called eternity sever. It was hard to imagine that even time was being corroded. The time fragments were actually decaying. Time was festering and gradually being obliterated. What could remain eternal in this world? Even the great Tao of time, even its core symbols were disappearing, returning to nothingness. Everything was returning to nothingness. Everything would disappear. Everything that existed would pass away. All ages would become nothing. Chu Feng was shaken and couldn't speak for a long time. Only after a long time did he snap back to reality. I succeeded. My true body arrived here. Chu Feng was excited and joyful. He felt as if he was becoming stronger and being mysteriously baptized by the true path. His corporeal body had crossed an inconceivable barrier and arrived in the world after death. At the same time, he was also paying a price. Chu Feng's eyes were dripping with blood. The fiery eyes, which had just transformed into an even more powerful, dual, eternal, venerable level, were cracking. They couldn't bear the illumination of a scene there. On his golden pupils, cracks appeared one after another, as if the crystals were about to explode. Blood flowed silently, dyeing his cheeks red. He hadn't even made contact. He had only seen part of the truth on the other side of the black heavenly moat, but it was already enough to make him fall forever, sinking into the realm of death. Touch the Tao, see the Emperor. He had done it. This time, he could see everything clearly. That woman's figure was very beautiful. Her long hair covered her fairy-like face. She was lying on the ground, her surroundings dark red. The blood didn't seem to have dried yet, and the terrifying special patterns were being emitted from that woman's body. Order after order, great Tao radiated outwards, spreading towards the true pollen road. As expected, it's her. There's a problem with the source expert. The great Tao fragments radiating towards the pollen road are indirectly transmitted to every believer. Those who walk this road are all sick. Chu Feng said in a low voice. This time, his physical body and spirit didn't dissipate. It was as if he had experienced the torment last time and was somewhat immune. Or perhaps the hints of the elders had come true. His true body had come here and seemed to have obtained some benefits. Only by surpassing this woman can the fundamental problem of this road be resolved. Chu Feng said in a low voice. There's something behind her. In the next moment, Chu Feng's eyes almost shattered. What did he see? Behind that woman, there were actually several coffins. It was extremely strange and inexplicable. In the instant that he saw the coffins, Chu Feng felt as if his body had mutated. An inexplicable change had occurred. What's going on? Was he going to transform because of this? Or was something bad about to happen? Behind the woman, there were actually several coffins. It was too strange. Were they the cause of everything? Or could it be that they were victims as well? Wong. In that instant, there was a shocking change. Behind the woman, as well as behind the coffins, there were saber lights and sword shadows. There was blood surging. Had the truth been revealed? What else was there? Chapter 1544. On the other side, blade radiance and sword shadows could be seen. Blood splashed everywhere. The battle was still going on? This was a bit frightening. How many years had it been? An incomparable great battle had yet to end at the origin of the pollen true path. One could deduce that this wasn't calculated in years, but rather in the rise and fall of eras. How many great eras had already become waves of destruction in history, yet the battle here still hadn't ended. This was just too terrifying. That woman with a spotless immortal body had her beautiful hair draped over her shoulders, covering her face. There was blood all around her, and corpses were lying on the ground. Was she killed by someone? Just the thought alone was incomparably frightening. She might be a creature of the supreme realm. What was puzzling and horrifying was that behind her, there were several mysterious coffins. They were full of traces of time, and the surrounding time-space was mottled with traces of decay. Whose were they? The coffins in front of the woman definitely had a gargantuan origin. Chu Feng's eyes were in intense pain. In the end, his left eye had already completely split open, and strands of human king blood flowed out. If he hadn't hurriedly closed his eyes, it would have exploded on the spot. Then, he was shaken again, saying with a trembling voice, "I think I saw a streak of sword radiance." He didn't care about the price as he stared there. Even though his pupils were cracking and about to explode, he just wanted to see what kind of creature was fighting. At the final moment, he finally saw a streak of special sword radiance sweep past, charging into the terrifying battlefield where blood splashed in all directions. It broke the balance and created chaos there. It's very familiar. Chu Feng broke out into a cold shiver. Was this the sword radiance that had previously hacked out from the depths of the first mountain? It really was similar. It was the one Joey spoke of again. He participated in this battle. Chu Feng was greatly shaken, but he was also puzzled and puzzled. It seemed like the era didn't match up. What kind of battle would last for so long? Moreover, it seemed like that person only hacked out this streak of sword radiance, and he recklessly charged in later. It didn't seem like he had participated in that battle from the very beginning. Perhaps it was only that person's sword that erupted during the unknown era and the unknown world. It pierced through the long river of time and struck here. It was because he had heard others say more than once that when a creature of that level slashed out, the shockwaves would be too great, and it would produce boundless great karma. If that sword directly reshaped the vast sea of time and accidentally slashed the other side, it was not impossible. Or could it be that all of this is already ended, and what I see are just the traces left behind in the past? Is it just the rippling and expanding scenes of those battles that have been branded over the years? When he thought of this possibility, Chu Feng increasingly felt that this might be the truth. After all, that woman was already dead, so she should be the loser. Being killed meant that the battle was already over. Just the traces left behind, just the space and time where the battle took place back then was already this terrifying. Chu Feng watched from across the heavenly chasm, his body about to be destroyed at any time. It was just too horrifying. Suddenly, he lowered his head and discovered that the stone jar was glowing. The hazy golden runes completely enveloped him, concealing him within. Chu Feng sucked in a cold breath of air, feeling a wave of fear. He became more and more aware that the battle of that level was simply terrifying to an inconceivable degree. Even if it was just the traces left behind, the aura left behind from countless great eras ago, it was already enough to kill all who peered in. If it wasn't for the stone jar, he would most likely have been directly erased. It was to the extent where he suspected that even if a true immortal came to this place, there wouldn't be the slightest bit of suspense. All traces would be quickly erased, dying without a burial ground. What happened back then? Why did the conflict start? Who killed the most powerful creature at the end of the pollen true path? The mysterious woman. Who exactly was it? Chu Feng's mind was filled with questions, urgently wishing to know. Even an unmatched creature of that level would die a violent death. This was a bit frightening. It was easy for one to believe that this woman should be the one with the greatest accomplishments in the pollen true path. There was something wrong with the woman at the source of this path. That was why the related runes radiating from her body, as well as terrifying curses, as well as incomprehensible Tao law fragments, contaminated everyone along the path. It was to the extent where all of those who came later became ill. If one deduced from this, then if something happened to the source, then what about the fallen Immortal King clan? Who was it that suffered an accident? He couldn't think too much. It was just too terrifying. Chu Feng stroked his eyes. His spirit and flesh resonated, alleviating some of the pain in his bleeding eyes. He wanted to clearly see the truth behind that woman. Who exactly was it that was fighting? His eyes began to bleed again, as if tears of blood flowed down his cheeks, dark red and frightening. His eyes were like spider webs, covered in terrifying cracks. In the end, he didn't see anyone. Perhaps not seeing was better. After all, the dead woman was already this terrifying. If he saw the living creatures of the supreme domain, it might trigger unpredictable changes. Chu Feng's mind suddenly pounded, starting to pay attention to the ancient coffins. The coffins are quite special. Are they the places where the corpses of creatures of that level were placed after they died? Or is it to say that there is another universe within these coffins, hiding even more terrifying unknown secrets? It was because even that woman collapsed in a pool of blood after her death, not lying in a coffin. Was it because she was in too much of a hurry? Or was it because her identity was lacking? Or perhaps she collapsed here for those who came later? Could it be that after the woman arrived here, she collapsed because of these coffins, and that it had something to do with this? This type of matter really couldn't be investigated in detail. It was too terrifying. Chu Feng had a strong desire to become stronger, until he had the qualifications to slaughter his way over and investigate everything clearly. Otherwise, he would feel uneasy. He really wanted to pursue the ultimate truth. Chu Feng discovered that after his gaze shifted towards the coffins, he felt a boundless, terrifying aura. It was as if it could instantly engulf the boundless cosmos, as if it could immediately destroy the heavens. He quickly turned his head, not daring to look anymore. What was going on? He even sensed that the stone jar was moving strangely. It was trembling slightly, as if it was extremely fearful. However, in the end, he couldn't hold back, paying attention again. He was greatly shocked. What was going on? It was actually also there. He hadn't noticed it before, but now, he finally saw it clearly. He should have seen a coffin before. His scalp went numb. He realized that he had discovered a part of the shocking and terrifying truth here today. Among the coffins, there was a bronze coffin. It was the same as the others, stained with the endless aura of time. It should have been in this world for who knew how many epochs. The long passage of time was impossible to verify, because it was too far away from the heavenly moat, and the area was a bit blurry. Chu Feng's eyes were dripping with blood, so he hadn't seen it clearly before. I want to look carefully. Why is it there? Chu Feng's heart trembled. There was no way he was mistaken. It was that coffin. It had been opened, and the coffin lid had slid to the side. Moreover, there was more than one coffin lid, because it had a total of 3 layers. It said, "I can't be mistaken." Great waves surged in Chu Feng's heart. It was rumored that when the one number 9 spoke of left, he sat in the innermost coffin. He crossed the blood-stained worlds and disappeared from the world. Moreover, the Celestial Emperor, the Dog Emperor, and the rotten corpse spoke of had also taken away a coffin. There was even a period of time when he lay in the coffin, his life and death unknown. From this, it could be seen that this coffin was mysterious and important. Not only was its origin boundlessly great, but in the endless years that followed, the people involved were all extraordinary, all peerless experts. The coffin has 3 layers. According to legend, the significance it represents is boundless. It can affect the past, the present, and the future. Chu Feng said to himself, how could he not be moved? How could he not be shocked? This was only a part of the secret he had learned from the Dog Emperor, Nine Dowie, and the others. He had never thought that he would see traces of it in ancient times. He believed that what happened at the end of this path should have happened countless epochs ago. At that time, The celestial emperor and the others shouldn't have risen yet. Even the powerful celestial emperor and even the 1-9 Tao he spoke of were far less ancient than this coffin. No one knew whose coffin this was. And now, Chu Feng might come into contact with the unknown secrets of that era. Who was it? Whose coffin was it? If he traced back to the past, who was buried inside? Bang! The runes in Chu Feng's left eye flashed and was destroyed. Then blood splattered. Even the fiery eyes of gold couldn't withstand it. When he stared at the coffins, his left eye had already self-destructed. He was not willing to give up. He continued to look, wanting to see clearly. In the end, all the cracks on his other eye were rapidly enlarging. The runes of the fiery eyes of gold broke, and the human monarch's blood splattered everywhere. And this was because he had the protection of the stone jar. In the end, he still fell to such a state. One could imagine how terrifying the dusky lands on the other side of the natural moat were. If not for the stone jar's glow and thick golden runes wrapping around his body, even a fallen true immortal would be instantly destroyed. Chu Feng didn't retreat. He was still persevering. Using his spirit to observe, his body was instantly eroded as if it was about to be vaporized. I see it. Is that outside the world? What kind of place is that? It's unfathomable. Chu Feng sucked in a breath of cold air. What he saw made his entire person dissipate. Even the stone jar couldn't protect it. At this moment, the stone jar rumbled, and there was an unusual movement like never before. It had never been like this before, almost burning with golden runes, covering Chu Feng and protecting him. Then, Chu Feng saw that ancient land. Chapter 1545. Transcending beyond the heavens, to the extent where it didn't even belong to the heavens. That place was like a plateau. However, this was definitely not a simple land. All methods were destroyed, even the highest level abilities scattered like mist there. Wasn't it in the human world? Transcending beyond the world, could it be that that place crossed time, not belonging to the past, present, or future? That was an ancient land engraved with a mottled aura of endless great eras. It was silent, bleak, grand, and ancient. What happened now? Being offered sacrifices by someone, opened by someone. It was clear that its origins were boundlessly great, but it was also extremely barren. It was unknown just how many great eras no one had set foot here. Some ruined scenes flashed past, as if it was currently being offered sacrifices by someone. One day, a bronze coffin, for some reason, appeared from the cracked plateau. Was it dug out by someone, or was it produced after the earth ruptured on its own? He couldn't see it. Then, there were several coffins that came from beyond the world, wrapped within great mist, rushing into the cracked, barren plateau. The scenes behind became chaotic. He couldn't see it anymore. Chu Feng's soul was trembling. That was a type of fatal danger, a mysterious pressure that passed through endless time and space, crossing who knew how many great eras to transmit over. He was sure that all of the pressure and danger originated from the coffins in the back. Then, time was being corroded, the years erased. How terrifying of a method was this? Even the laws of time and other things were destroyed after being radiated. The scenes became chaotic. He couldn't see it anymore. In the end, several coffins were lying there, the bronze coffins already opened, divided into 3 layers. What happened? That coffin was opened. Were there creatures inside? Who was buried? Where did they go? Chu Feng discovered that he was unintentionally moving backwards. Otherwise, his name would have definitely been erased from this world, no longer existing. The scenes just now, some of the ancient events just now, seemed to be extremely serious. The level involved too high. Even though he was just peeping through space and time, it was still enough to make him die 1,000 times over. Then, he discovered something that left him stupefied and horrified. Everything just now, he didn't see it himself from the other side. He overestimated himself. Didn't he truly witness it? It was as if that was reflected by the stone jar. The scenes that appeared. It was because the stone container was still shining, a portion of the scene from just now still remaining. It floated in front of the golden symbols, displayed before him. Even so, Chu Feng couldn't withstand it just now and was almost obliterated. Chu Feng smiled bitterly. He knew it. How could it be traced back to that level? He almost evaporated from the face of the earth just by looking at the woman's corpse. There was no need to even talk about tracing back to those things that had happened long ago and not in the present. He definitely did not have the ability to trace back to the source and see the ultimate truth of the ancient era. Everything was shown by the stone jar. This made everyone tremble with fear and reverence. What kind of background did this stone jar have? How much history did it have? Did it even know a bit about the ancient bronze coffin's history? However, it did not show him the person buried in the coffin. I want to see more to truly understand the root of the problem. Chu Feng said softly. His eyes were still dripping with blood. His body was surrounded by golden symbols. He was moving about with the stone jar, resonating with it. He wanted to see even more of the past. And then he really saw it. That bronze coffin had actually flipped sideways as if it had been placed on the altar. Was it being consecrated, or was it being used as a sacrificial offering? What are the origins of the other coffins? They can actually appear around the bronze coffin. However, the other coffins weren't on the altar. In a split second, some feedback was transmitted. One of the coffins was actually cast from mother gold. The scene that was reflected showed that all of the mother gold had been collected. This was truly the mother gold that was known to be indestructible. No matter how many eras changed, it wouldn't die. The so-called 9 mother gold wasn't the limit at all. There were at least dozens of them here. All things in the world, from the creation of the universe to the evolution of the absolute beginning. Since ancient times, as long as the mother gold had appeared, that coffin would have it. This looked much more imposing than the bronze coffin. Even though there was a sense of great vicissitudes and even an aura of decay, upon closer inspection, it was the time around the mother gold coffin. It was the world around it that was decaying and not the coffin itself. The other coffin was the same. It actually didn't decay itself, but instead affected the surrounding environment. It was drying up and the world was decaying. That second coffin was actually hollowed out from an ancient tree. It even carried a few leaves, fresh and tender, their vitality terrifyingly great. Chu Feng was shocked. The life force of those leaves was too rich, the feeling they gave off even far exceeding that of true immortals. They should be even more powerful than the so-called immortal kings of fallen immortal kings. Even a single leaf could be like this, the life force rising and falling like an ocean. Meanwhile, what about the life force contained within the entire coffin? If it was completely released, just how boundless would it be? What kind of creature was buried inside? Upon closer inspection, on the fresh and tender leaves, those patterns, veins, and other things were like the galaxy of the cosmos. A single leaf was like the condensation of a great thousand world. Terrifying. Great waves overflowed within Chu Feng's heart, almost suffocating. Unfortunately, in the end, he only saw these 2 coffins. The others couldn't be seen. It was because the stone jar was trembling, shaking. There was restraining fear, even more so, a certain type of emotion that no longer appeared. It was clear that these coffins were different from the bronze coffin. They were extremely dangerous, and their positions were also different. They weren't on the altar, facing the bronze coffin. Moreover, was it because of their arrival that the bronze coffin appeared from the plateau? Gradually, all the coffins disappeared. When Chu Feng came back to his senses and used his spirit to repair his fiery eyes, he looked towards the other side of the moat. There was only the woman lying in a pool of blood. The coffin was nowhere to be seen. So, it was you who wanted me to see those coffins? Chu Feng lowered his head and looked at the stone jar. What background do you have? Did you witness that era? In a trance, some broken scenes appeared in Chu Feng's injured eyes. The stone jar pierced through one era after another. It seemed to be fleeing. Behind it, there seemed to be boundless terror. Then, Chu Feng completely woke up. He couldn't see anything. The stone jar was silent and no longer revealed anything. That bronze coffin has a great origin. It pierced through the world. Chu Feng speculated, his thoughts running wild. To this day, He had learned enough secrets from the Dog Emperor, Judao Yi, and the others, as well as heard many rumors. He even heard that the rise of the celestial emperor that the Dog Emperor spoke of was also because of that bronze coffin. Whose coffin was the bronze coffin? In the beginning, who was buried in it? It was very important. The one that Judao Yi spoke of left in it. And the celestial emperor that the Dog Emperor spoke of was also closely related to the bronze coffin. After the final bloody battle, he lay inside, drifting beyond the world. No one knows whether he was dead or alive. The emperor began in the coffin and ended in the coffin. Very quickly, Chu Feng shook his head. He thought of something that Judao Yi vaguely mentioned. Who knew how many years ago coffins were not used to bury people, but to cultivate? If that was the case, then everything was different. There's something on the other side. Chu Feng's eyes gradually recovered. When he tried to look again, he saw some crystalline substance on the other side. His eyelids twitched. Was that some kind of soil? He remembered now. It was similar to the soil on the plateau where the bronze coffin was buried. As the woman's blood flowed past, under the illumination of the blood-red light, the originally ordinary soil began to glow with a misty light. This is super mutant soil. It's an unimaginable soil. Can I dig some of it away? Even though his eyes were hurting and about to split open again, Chu Feng's eyes were still burning with passion. Very quickly, some scenes appeared in his eyes. He knew where the soil came from. As expected, when the bronze coffin was lying in the area behind the woman, it fell from the ancient patterns. It came from the plateau. Wong. The void trembled. The stone jar bloomed with runes and wrapped around Chu Feng. He left this world and returned to the real world. He stood under the purple tree that hadn't withered yet. At the last moment, he saw the other side of the heavenly moat. Although it was empty and all the coffins had disappeared, there seemed to be some kind of aura lingering. Was the stone jar afraid and retreating because of that? Back then, there were several other coffins that appeared in the era of the bronze coffin. Just thinking about the inside story was enough to make one shiver. Returning, Chu Feng was shocked to find that there was some soil on the stone jar. The theft of soil was successful. Not only was the stone jar afraid, but it had also stolen a treasure. Did it seize some special soil? Yes. Yes. Chapter 1546. The earth came from beyond the world, a deathly stillness that was devoid of sound and the passage of time. It was an incomparably ancient and spacious plateau. The earth that had once buried the coffin had been brought out. Chu Feng felt as if he had been struck by a thick bolt of lightning and was in a torrential downpour. His entire body went numb and cold, and his heart trembled incessantly. It was truly like a dream. What had he experienced just now? He was still in a trance even now. He had witnessed all sorts of strange scenes at the end of the pollen path. They were terrifying and strange, and he had witnessed some intermittent and inconceivable events of the past. Now, Chu Feng had returned. As before, he stood under the tree as if he had never left. A gentle breeze blew, bringing with it the scent of the earth and the mountains and the freshness of the vegetation. The unwithered purple tree swayed, its patterns undulating, and its leaves turning over like the opening of a scripture. Waves of Buddhist chants roused Chu Feng. The space inside the stone jar wasn't small, but there was only a small amount of earth hanging on it. It looked very ordinary and was only a handful of it in his hands. However, its origins were too astonishing. Chu Feng glanced at the tree beside him and then at the dark earth in his hands. Should he bury some of it at the roots? Perhaps he could even make this tree mutate again. His heart raced as he thought that his guess might come true. Today was already very special. A long time had passed since the seed had sprouted, grown, and become a tree. It should have withered long ago and turned into a seed. However, it still had some vitality and hadn't dried up yet. Chu Feng decided to give it a try. He carefully buried some of the ancient and mysterious highland soil under the big tree. He wanted to see what would happen in the end. He hoped there would be a pleasant surprise. Otherwise, how could he overtake them? How could he meet Yao Yao? And how could he face the martial madman who was likely to attack Yao Yao? The atmosphere in the two-realm battlefield was strange. It was somewhat heavy and oppressive, but it also made people excited. It could even be said that it tugged at everyone's heartstrings. What did Yao Yao's sacrificial dance summon? The three emperors appeared, and their heroic spirits illuminated the past and present. The three beams of light that reached the sky dispersed, and the three figures gradually disappeared. After a long time, the evolvers of each race still hadn't come back to their senses. The effects were too great. Even the fallen true immortals were short of breath and felt suffocated. Were they really the three emperors? There was one exception. The martial emperor's hair was disheveled, and now he was in the prime of his life. His bronze-colored, robust body and intimidating eyes locked onto Yao Yao. Moreover, he was walking forward and pressing forward. Some people were shocked and sighed in their hearts. As expected of the martial madman, he was actually going to make a move. That was the successor of the great empress. "What do you want?" By Yao Yao's side, the old man with a mouthful of yellow teeth spoke coldly. He withdrew all of his smiles and was no longer in a playful manner. Ultimate energy expanded. To think that I would meet a descendant of the three emperors. I like to see just how profound these world-shaking supreme emperor techniques are. The martial madman said. The yellow-toothed elder wanted to spit on his face. Was his face even thicker than a cow's hide? A monster who was about to reach the end of his life wanted to lay his hands on a young girl? However, the martial madman was very serious and calm. His eyes were intimidating as he said, "Since we have to weigh the pros and cons, I will not suppress her with my cultivation level. Come, let me have a look at your art of time." He fancied the Tao law of time that Yao Yao grasped. Time could slay the celestial emperor and obliterate everything in the world. No matter what era it was, it could be said to be an unrivaled law and one of the supreme great Taos. Back then, the martial madman didn't hesitate to take risks and excavate various famed mountains in order to find the most powerful ancient technique. In the end, he found a rotten scripture by the skin of his teeth and reaped great rewards. Why did he come here today? It was only because he sensed Yao Yao's Tao law of time and was attracted here. He wanted to peek at its foundation and verify the scripture of time that he had grasped. If he could break through to the next level and unveil the ultimate time scripture, he might be able to break through quickly and climb to new heights to look down on the world. This was related to his evolutionary path. He wanted to blast his way into that lofty and glorious palace. Even if the great apocalypse is destined to be unchangeable, I will leave my name in the world and carve it on the river of time. The martial madman's expression was indifferent, but there was a kind of madness in the depths of his eyes. Even a being at his level was pessimistic about the future. Was this the madness and struggle of the last desperate moment? Was the martial madman trying his best to grab hold of an opportunity after seeing it? As far as he was concerned, time had become his strongest obsession and his only path. All of a sudden, the surrounding space was filled with dazzling silver light. One after another, snow-white wisteria spread out and took root in the void. As the leaves turned over, they produced sonorous sounds and sparks flew in all directions. Astonishing Tao patterns rippled out. Clang, clang, clang. One vine after another flew toward the martial madman like a city forged from silver, immortal gold. They stretched taut like thousands of immortal spears and pierced through the space. Yao Yao took the initiative to attack. With a single thought, the void was overflowing with vitality. Apart from the immortal gold vines, there were also golden lotus flowers with fiery lights like the sea. They took root in the void and were filled with the aura of the great Taos. No one had expected that a woman of exceptional beauty who looked as clear as an immortal would be so powerful and take the initiative to attack the martial emperor. "All I want is the time scripture," the martial madman said indifferently with his hands clasped behind his back. A dazzling light shot out from between his eyebrows. With a boom, it was as if a vast and mighty ocean had exploded in his surroundings. It was a glaring sea of light that blocked all the immortal gold vines that were charging at him. Then they exploded. Fragments of the great Taos fluttered everywhere as the space was torn apart. However, he didn't maintain his disdainful and arrogant attitude for long before he was drowned out by the sound of scriptures. It was a sea of ripples and a vast amount of golden light. Golden lotus flowers bloomed continuously, and every petal was a scripture. They fluttered in the air and drowned the martial madman. Everyone was shocked. Vaguely, they seemed to see an empress descending from the sky, as if she was a sovereign overlooking the world. That was Yao Yao. She was bathed in golden lotus flowers and lingered in the world filled with golden scriptures. Every movement she made was filled with mighty power as she blasted a palm at the martial madman. Emperor technique. Many people were astonished. The pupils of a few fallen true immortals constricted as they stared attentively. That was because there were such records in their orthodoxy's highest secret scriptures. However, their methods, their inheritance had already become dark, unable to use this type of divine energy anymore. Flowers bloom with a single thought. Who can contend against her in the heavens and on the earth? Someone muttered. Apparently, he had recalled some ancient legends. As expected, even a martial madman was moved. He was drowned by the golden petals that filled the sky. Every petal was engraved with scriptures, and they were all supreme, secret scriptures. They gave him an aura as if the 33 heavens were pressing down on him and wanted to obliterate the world. Each golden petal was like a layer of the heavens as it pressed down. With a rumble, the heaven and earth exploded. The turbulent flow of spatial energy surged like a broken dam in the sea of stars. The domain around the martial madman was distorted and then torn apart. The scriptures and the golden petals broke through his protective barrier and slashed at him. Of course, this was also the result of him not suppressing Yao Yao with his realm. Runes flowed around the martial madman's body. He was like an immortal king who could not be destroyed in this world. The aura of the great Tao covered the sky and the earth. Many evolvers almost went limp on the ground and wanted to worship him. His fist was incomparably resplendent and directly exploded the heaven and earth. The two-realm battlefield rumbled and was about to collapse. However, the golden lotus petals were firm and immortal. They flickered with boundless beams of light, and the sky was filled with scriptures. There were divine ripples everywhere like the rising and falling of the vast sea. Boom! The lotus petals flew over and rang like a great bell. It was so loud that even the deaf could hear, and it cleansed everyone's mind. Every golden lotus petal was terrifyingly heavy and dazzling. When it crashed in front of the martial madman, it truly weighed more than millions of caddies and rumbled incessantly. The scriptures on the lotus petals were glaring and divine as they illuminated the world. One could see the golden lotus petals submerging the martial madman and sealing him within. They formed a huge golden lotus and began to close. Everyone inhaled a breath of cold air. What kind of power was this? That graceful woman actually dared to seal a martial emperor as soon as she arrived? This made many of the older generation begin to doubt their lives. This era was too crazy, and they felt that they had fallen behind the times. A woman was actually so powerful and tyrannical that she could suppress a martial emperor with just a raise of her hand. Within the resplendent lotus of the great Tao, the martial madman's eyes were as cold as lightning. How many years had it been since someone dared to look down on him? His entire body was covered in dazzling runic flames. He suddenly shook and was about to shatter the divine lotus. With a boom, many lotus petals began to crack and interweave as if they were about to explode. However, the golden lotus petals shone brilliantly and the cracks rapidly healed. The petals flourished once again and were about to close and refine the martial madman. Many people inhaled a breath of cold air. It was just a flower, but it was actually capable of trapping a martial emperor. The evolvers of the Yang realm, in particular, were incomparably shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. No one understood the martial madman better than they did. He was a madman who was revered as a martial emperor and had intimidated many eras. Today, he actually encountered such a woman. This is the emperor flower. It's understandable that it stunned the world when it first bloomed. A fallen true immortal said in a deep voice. No one knew whether he was talking about the secret technique of blooming flowers with a thought or Yao Yao herself was the emperor flower's first bloom. Everyone's emotions were fluctuating, and it was difficult for them to calm down. In fact, since the martial emperor made his move to weigh Yao Yao's laws of time, everyone realized that this woman was absolutely extraordinary and beyond imagination. As a matter of fact, it was indeed so. However, the martial emperor was worthy of his name. His body was amidst the dazzling lotus petals. His right hand moved, and countless runes surged. It was the power of time and the patterns of time that erupted with a loud bang. In the blink of an eye, some of the petals withered and were actually about to wither. He was very direct as he performed the scripture of time and blasted everything in his way. He had originally wanted to force Yao Yao to use the great Tao of time. Now, he was the first to attack. Something astonishing happened. Some of the golden lotus petals withered, but they were quickly reborn. The emperor flower would never wither. It turned into a scroll and flipped through it. Countless runes blossomed and drowned the martial madman once again. Boom! The martial madman's blood, chi, surged violently and seeped out of his skin. It engulfed the sky and the earth like a vast ocean, blocking the golden lotus petals and avoiding the emperor flower. At the same time, he performed the secret technique of time and opened up an ancient path of time that extended toward Yao Yao. He raised his fist and attacked. His fist was as brilliant as a concentrated sea of stars and as dazzling as the condensation of countless suns. He activated the scripture of time, and the peerless fist seal seemed to be able to destroy the heavens. The martial emperor's imposing manner was too powerful. He was the only one reigning supreme and difficult to match. What surprised everyone was that Yao Yao moved almost at the same time as him. Instead of dodging, she flew high into the air and took the initiative to attack. She was like a fairy, ethereal, and otherworldly. But the moment she made her move, it was so shocking that it shocked the world. She was like an emperor flower in full bloom, releasing a peerless brilliance amidst her absolute beauty. That pure white and translucent fist actually blasted toward the martial madman's peerless fist seal. It showed no signs of dodging and was instead extremely powerful. She wanted to meet force with force against the martial emperor. I've never been defeated in the same domain. Yao Yao's voice shocked everyone. Boom! The two charged together. The martial emperor's fist seal was like the sky and represented the great power of the martial emperor's peerless power since prehistoric times. Yao Yao, on the other hand, was sharp and resplendent amidst her emptiness. She was fearless of all enemies and released a peerless and tyrannical energy amidst her immortal aura. Everyone's expressions changed. This woman was truly out of the ordinary. This was a great confrontation between the pinnacle. Was she actually going to shake the martial emperor's peerless foundation? In the mountains, Chu Feng was moved. He was somewhat excited at the bottom of his heart. After burying that ineffable era's plateau soil, the big tree had actually changed. On the tree, the withering flower lit up once again. Wisps of a special aura were released, and a wisp of mist pervaded the air. It descended like a sovereign and enveloped him. Come, I'm going to attack the martial madman, the third sect master. Chapter 1547. Originally, some of the leaves were drooping and sickly. According to the time, it should have withered and become a seed again. But now, the purple-brown tree once again shone with strands of vitality. The most important thing was that the flower was becoming larger, continuously expanding until it reached 1.5 meters in diameter. Strands of mysterious mist scattered down and covered Chu Feng. In a daze, he seemed to have seen the most ancient era again. He saw the plateau outside of this world, silent and cold. Even time was corroded there, obliterated, the so-called unbreakable all became nothingness there. Only the plateau remained, desolate and silent. It carried the last traces of the most ancient era and buried the bronze coffin. I see it again. Chu Feng seemed to be talking in a dream as he sank deep into it. However, this time, he didn't touch the Tao and didn't reach the end of the pollen road. He was still in the real world. He wouldn't forget his experience not long ago. He saw the origin of the pollen road, saw the fallen woman, and saw several different coffins. What happened in the most ancient era? As long as one paid attention to it, as long as one explored it, one would be obliterated. Even the divine abilities of the heavens couldn't stop it. Fallen true immortals turned to ashes and immortal kings died. Who is buried under the plateau? Who was buried in the bronze coffin? Or what kind of creature was sleeping inside? It seemed to be the source of everything. Even the one Jiui spoke of and the heavenly emperor that the dog emperor followed had interacted with this coffin. Chu Feng was trying his best to visualize, wanting to see through the frozen earth and the scenery under the wasteland. Unfortunately, that was outside of this world. If the stone jar didn't reveal itself and show him, even if an immortal king came personally and burned his own great Tao, he still wouldn't be able to find that place, let alone see the truth. In the end, he discovered that the mist suddenly became thicker, isolating everything in front of him. The plateau he could vaguely see was submerged, and everything disappeared. In reality, in the real world, the tree he was standing on was releasing a special mist that enveloped him. Then he discovered that he was evolving. The strange soil quality was actually so special. He only took a small pinch and didn't use all of it. When he buried it under the roots, this kind of change happened. The flower was enormous, eventually becoming snow white and sparkling. What scattered down wasn't pollen, but rather a hazy mist. It was like immortal energy, but also like a layer of strange veil. Chu Feng felt a tearing pain. On his back, a pair of pure white wings grew fiercely, breaking through his flesh. His full head of hair flew up, his face delicate and pretty. Now, a pair of wings actually appeared on his back, as if an angel had descended into the world. However, he didn't want wings. Was he still a human? The change was too intense and too fast. He didn't even have time to react before he grew a pair of holy wings. However, when he lightly flapped his wings, he felt a powerful energy that was boundlessly terrifying. His wings instantly tore through space, and he directly shot up into the sky. His speed was simply too fast. Then, with a flap of his wings, he returned in a flash and stood under the tree once more. Soon after, he felt intense pain again. His ribs, as well as his back, broke open one after another. Pairs of wings grew out one after another. Some were pure and snow white, some dazzling with golden light, some pitch black like ink, and even more so the color of the underworld. There were a total of 12 pairs of wings that appeared on Chu Feng's back, all of them flowing with astonishing symbols and filled with great Tao fragments. This made him look like an angel creature from the history of evolution, moreover the highest level. However, upon closer inspection, it didn't seem like it, but instead more like the wings of a pung, phoenix, golden crow, and other highest-level birds. After the blood on his back congealed, Chu Feng was no longer in pain. He sensed the astonishing energy, and he had a type of resolution. When the 12 pairs of wings spread out, he could easily cut apart his opponents, and with a flap of his wings, he could turn those great enemies into ashes. Moreover, he clearly sensed that his body began to become ethereal, his body becoming more and more healthy, becoming more and more agile. It was as if with a slight movement, he would be able to travel 100,000 li. A single spread of the great Pung King's wings is already 108,000 li. Did I surpass the great Pung King? Chu Feng seriously suspected that he had set foot on the path of recovery of some ancient creature's genes. However, his expression changed in the blink of an eye. His left shoulder was very itchy, and the skin there had split open. Unexpectedly, a head had begun to drill out. This head somewhat resembled him, but there was an extremely cold aura to it. Its pupils were silvery white, and it erupted with lightning, instantly turning a giant mountain in front of him into flying ashes. This was somewhat terrifying. There was actually an extra head. Although its power wasn't small, he still looked somewhat strange. Suddenly, he felt a sharp pain in his right shoulder as another head suddenly grew out. This head was full of fluttering hair, and it easily tore apart the heaven and earth. It was truly demonic. Rumor has it that when the great cosmos evolves, they will decay and become indescribable. The root cause of all this is because they have received too much pollen, and when developing their potential, they will release too many indescribable things. After sensing this, Chu Feng thought of this matter. The reason why the great cosmos had decayed and experienced such terrifying changes was not only related to the strange substances, but also because the pollen path had given them too much and they couldn't bear it. Now, he hadn't even reached that realm yet, but he had already encountered such changes. Had it given him too many mutations? He raised his head and looked at the giant flower on the tree. The mysterious mist drifted down and covered him. Was this stimulating the release of the immortal treasury in his body, or was it directly bestowing him with some kind of divine ability? Or perhaps it was opening up his special bloodline. I want power, but I don't want this kind of mutation. If this goes on, will I still be myself? What kind of creature will I become? Chu Feng became vigilant. In the blink of an eye, he experienced an even more ferocious mutation. On his head, his scalp split open, and a pair of sparkling purple dragon horns grew out from his hair. Accompanied by lightning and thunder, he casually moved, and that pair of horns broke through the blue dome of heaven, releasing terrifying and astonishing lightning. However, these changes weren't accompanied by decay. Overall, it could be considered a normal, extraordinary mutation. But very soon, Chu Feng couldn't stay calm anymore. He felt a wave of numbness at the base of his arm. Amidst popping sounds, his flesh split open and two pairs of arms grew out. He had become a three-headed, six-armed monster. Was this the reappearance of a legend? In the history of evolution, this should only be a great divine ability, but why was it dripping with blood and growing out of his body? Chu Feng was increasingly aware that things weren't looking good. If he could be said to be able to remain calm at the moment, then the following changes frightened him. He was in a state of panic and could no longer remain calm. That was because there was something strange between his legs. The moment he lowered his head, his face immediately turned pale. What was going on? There was originally one pung spreading its wings, but in the blink of an eye, there were three of them. He really wanted to say, "To hell with your second, Grandpa. This really doesn't need three." In the blink of an eye, his body stiffened and he felt somewhat itchy. Were they going to grow scales again? He couldn't bear it any longer. Chu Feng quickly took action to intervene in this kind of mutation. First, he started from the wings on his back and decisively refined them. He didn't want the wings because this was a kind of heart-wrenching pain. He used a wondrous technique to obliterate the wings, stripping them from his body and refining them cleanly. At the same time, he used his fiery eyes to observe internally. He wanted to preserve that kind of ability because he saw that there were symbols and mysterious patterns at the base of the 12 pairs of wings. That was the source of some kind of ability. Under Chu Feng's guidance, the great Tao patterns disappeared from the surface of his body. However, they circulated within his body and spread to his limbs and bones. Then, he discovered that his own agility was still there. With a slight movement of his body, he arrived 50,000 kilometers away. This wasn't the use of a wondrous technique, but rather his body's instincts. It was as if the 12 pairs of wings were still there. He could break through the heaven and earth in an instant and fly away at top speed. At the same time, he couldn't leave behind the two heads on his left and right shoulders. He thought of a way to refine them and preserve their great Tao essence. Not long after, he was drenched in blood again. He guided the mysterious patterns on his shoulders to spread all the way to his eyes. making his fiery eyes even more astonishing. He stared ahead with all his might and glanced at the mountains and rivers. In the blink of an eye, the great mountains disintegrated and burned to ashes. At the same time, when he focused his gaze and activated his energy, it was as if an immortal sword had slashed through. It split the heaven and earth and formed a terrifying crack in the dark void. The two heads disappeared, but the divine might they possessed was inherited by his eyes. Chu Feng decisively reconstructed his body. He only wanted to become a human and didn't want his body to mutate inexplicably. However, he also wanted to preserve those divine abilities and special techniques. I'm Chu Qiandi. Reconstructing a mutated body like this is equivalent to forcefully suppressing and grinding away some kind of inauspiciousness. Chapter 1548. A Secret That Can't Be Spoken Of. Chu Feng lowered his head, looking at the secret that had his legs refined. He truly felt incomparably ashamed. Then, he became serious and began to pull out his bones. At the same time, he purified his blood, removed his dragon horns, and dug out his divine tendons and sacred skin. His entire body was dripping with blood. He underwent astonishing changes, one that was even more serious than before. What wings, 3 heads, 6 arms, and other things. Even his skin was changed, becoming a golden, sacred skin. There were also those tendons that released divine light. They were like horned dragons, but also like vines. They extended throughout his body and interweaved, causing his flesh to swell. It was extremely terrifying. Those were divine tendons. He didn't want any of these things. He only wanted to be a human. These abilities could be left behind, but his body definitely couldn't be changed. Turning his back on the human race wasn't something he wanted. I have 3 heads, 6 arms, 12 wings, and even the 3 secrets of Peng Cheng 10,000 Li. Chu Feng's voice rang through the mountains. However, I don't care. He then added. He was extremely satisfied with his current state. He had gotten rid of these troublesome matters. However, as soon as he finished shouting in the mountains, his heart immediately felt intense pain. That originally robust and powerful energy source that was red like a sun actually cracked open, and then with a pu sound, it exploded. Chu Feng's face immediately became pale. His body staggered backwards, almost falling on his back. His mouth was full of bloody suds. How could an ordinary person endure this type of sudden change? This type of serious injury could easily take one's life. Even if it was an expert who suddenly exploded his heart like this, his vitality would still be greatly injured, to the extent where it might even harm his foundation and exhaust large amounts of spiritual matter. Pung pung pung. In that instant, an expanse of purple symbols blossomed. Mysterious symbols appeared where his heart was, condensing a bloody mist and evolving into great Tao patterns. In the end, a purple heart was born that was full of vitality and throbbing. The changes were too fast. In that instant, Chu Feng felt as if his limbs and bones were filled with even greater power. The purple true blood was like magma, but also like a stellar stream. It surged violently, extending to every part of his body. The energy intensity was astonishing. His blood transformed, and his heart underwent rebirth. This was an extremely intense and terrifying transformation. His heart was instantly replaced, and the level of his true blood increased substantially. Chu Feng frowned and did not immediately chop at the heart. This was because he discovered that this did not seem to be a mutation. Instead, it was his sovereign personage's physique becoming stronger. The lightning-fast silver blood had turned into purple blood. Furthermore, it had a faint golden light, like molten metal flowing through it. 4th Revolution Human King? This was the 4th metamorphosis. Xiao Chun was astonished. According to the records, it would take several thousand years to reach the 3rd cycle of sovereign personage. However, he was now at the 4th cycle. Xiao Chun had greatly shortened this process. He knew that this definitely had a price. In the end, it would be accompanied by decay, inauspiciousness, and other things. This was bound together with his own evolution. But was he afraid now? He didn't care at all. He had been thinking of ways to increase his strength, wanting to become the strongest in a short period of time. Otherwise, with the Great War already about to arrive, this great era about to reach its end, if he still didn't grow up, he would be nothing more than a pile of dirt in the end. What future and potential was there to talk about? He didn't change his true blood and calmly waited for it to evolve naturally. However, he had heard the legends that the end of the sovereign personage's blood was to return. Only then would it be the sovereign personage's blood. At this moment, the sound of thunder suddenly rang out from above Chu Feng's head. The sound was deafening, and the snow-white lightning shone down. The flowers on the tree actually exploded and then withered. At the same time, the entire tree withered. Its life had finally come to an end. This seed had already displayed extraordinary power today. The time it could stay in this world was much longer than before. A snow-white beam of light fell onto the ground like a thunderbolt. With a pu sound, it even split apart the mountain. That was a long blade. It was entirely snow-white and incomparably sharp. It was suitable for an adult to hold in their hands as they galloped through the battlefield. It was a vicious weapon. Chu Feng walked over and picked it up. He was extremely shocked. This was the result of the tree blossoming and then withering. It was the seed left behind after the final metamorphosis. This was completely different from the past. It was actually a true weapon and no longer a pocket-sized one. Was it because the quality of the soil this time was different and beyond imagination? So, the seed left behind also began to be different? Chu Feng didn't know. As early as when that pure white flower grew to a diameter of 1 or 2 meters, he had already realized that there might be an abnormality this time. It really was so. With a slight activation, the snow-white blade light slashed through the sky. This blade was too sharp. As Chu Feng operated it, it became densely packed, and its entire body was covered in Tao patterns. Can it kill a true immortal? Can it kill a fallen immortal king? Chu Feng raised the blade and soared into the sky. His aura skyrocketed, and with a slash of a blade, it was as if he was going to slash apart this part of the Yang realm. Energy exploded like a mushroom cloud and drowned out a part of the sky. His terrifying aura increased by a large margin. Has my evolution succeeded? He was talking to himself. Although he had undergone another metamorphosis, he was still unsatisfied. It was too difficult to kill the martial madman. That was because he was now in the state of a quasi-almighty. It could be said that he had taken a step in, but it could also be said that he was still lacking a heel. However, Chu Feng felt that he could enter at any time. He ferociously shook the runes all over his body. In an instant, his limbs and bones were all glowing with Tao patterns circulating. The abilities that were born not long ago appeared at the same time. For example, his ribs and back expanded like 12 rock wings. In fact, those were resplendent golden runes interweaving. Above his head, dragon-shaped blood energy that pierced through the heavens rushed up. Those were the runes left behind by the dragon horns that had been born earlier. They were glowing and fusing with his blood energy. As for the 3 heads and 6 arms and the fiery eyes, they all had different manifestations. His entire body was covered in interweaving Tao patterns. I still need to purify more. The runes are in my hands, and the laws are condensed into nothingness. Chu Feng said softly. He baptized his body once again and made those runes return to nothingness. They shouldn't take root in corresponding parts of his body like roots. He only returned to his normal state after a long time. He felt that this was the only way to completely return to the human race. I become a dual Tao immortal with a single thought. Chu Feng clearly understood his own state, but he didn't take that final step. He wanted to observe for a while. That was because he had a premonition that once he became a dual Tao immortal, his entire body would rapidly decay. It might even be irreversible, and the Zhou clan speculation would become true. I haven't fallen into a state of despair yet, so I'll leave myself some hope. I won't step in for now, but I'll rush in when the need arises. Chu Feng's expression was resolute. He knew what he had to do. At the same time, he was more or less confident. He didn't believe that he would really walk toward destruction and decay if he were to be forced into such a situation. He wanted to ascend. Now, he lacked that kind of opportunity. It was difficult for him to fully unleash his potential and activate the miracle without cutting off all means of retreat. Even if I become a dual Tao immortal, it'll still be difficult for me to kill the martial madman. Time waits for no man. What should I do to save Yao Yao? Chu Feng was anxious, not for himself. The main reason he was so anxious to evolve was to save Yao Yao. Celestial Emperor, wake up. In the end, he braced himself and spoke. He didn't want to borrow the stone jar's power at first, but now he was throwing caution to the wind for Yao Yao. There was no doubt that there was a huge problem with this jar. Its origins were terrifying, and it bore unimaginable karma. He would have to pay it back in the future. Now, Chu Feng couldn't care less. However, the stone jar was quiet and didn't react at all. It was as still as an empty space. Chu Feng suddenly looked up. Then, he couldn't help but eat and began to summon the divine beast. Black Dog, Dog Emperor, Holy Saint, where are you? I miss you. He shouted at the firmament like a llama. At the same time, he visualized the giant black dog's appearance in his mind and constantly muttered the two words Dog Emperor. However, he didn't get any response even after a long time. He could only change the way he addressed the beast and shout Dog. Dog, where are you? I, the Celestial Emperor, summon you. Millions and millions of miles away, in the boundless nothingness, in a place beyond the Yang realm, the Dog Emperor had a square head, large ears, eyes as large as copper bells, and ears protruding. He bared his badly damaged white teeth and used his large claws to pick his ears. He murmured, "This dog is old and deaf. Why do I feel like someone is talking about me? Are you going to offer me a sacrifice? Are you giving me a sacred sacrifice?" Then it completely exploded in anger because it finally heard clearly that someone was calling it a dog. Woof! He immediately opened his bloody mouth and bit at a certain part of the void. He wanted nothing more than to bite that world to pieces. Beside it was the bald man, as well as the rotten corpse. They were all given a fright, thinking that the dog had gone mad and was going to attack them with its black mouth. At the same time, in Chu Feng's world, a giant black shadow appeared among the mountains and rivers. It opened its mouth wide and bit over, swallowing the whole mountain in one gulp. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He quickly retreated and avoided this bite. Did he really summon a divine beast? Dog Emperor, don't bite. We're on the same side. We fought side by side. Do you know who helped you in the Soul River? Look carefully, shouted Chu Feng. Millions and millions of miles away, in the boundless void, the Dog Emperor picked his ears and murmured, "What the hell? Who's trying to get close to me? We suffered heavy losses in this battle, so I can't hear you clearly. Do you hear me?" He asked the two people beside him. At this time, the rotten corpse's expression was also ugly. In the end, his liver almost exploded. This was because he vaguely heard someone murmuring and whispering to get close to him. They said that he was that person's bloodline and that he was some little Taoist. F*CKU. Your grandpa. Don't let this Taoist grandpa catch you. The rotten corpse's neck was red. In the Yang realm, Chu Feng was anxious. Why didn't it work? He cursed the dog, but apart from almost being bitten, there was no reaction. Old Nine Dowie, Ninth Master, where are you? Hurry up and bless me. I'm going to kill the martial madman. Chu Feng once again summoned a vicious beast, a sequence creature. What's the matter? This time, Nine Dowie reacted in time. He was crying and crying. This was because he had entered the path of reincarnation. Deep inside, he found clues and learned the cruel truth. That person's son was lying in a coffin. How is this possible? What's wrong with this world? Even that person's son ended up like this. He couldn't believe it. That person clearly wanted to resurrect many people and let those people reappear in the world. How could even his own son die? Nine Dowie's vision went black and his ears were ringing. He had a bad feeling. If even that person's son was dead, then what about those people back then? Could it be that they were all dead? Most importantly, Could it be that there was something wrong with that person himself? Celestial Arch, attack. Please bless me, shouted Chu Feng. He once again summoned the Dog Emperor, the rotten corpse, and 9 Dowie. Then, he didn't care anymore. He flew toward the two-realm battlefield and tore through the sky. Bless the attacking Celestial Arch. Chapter 1549. Chu Feng's speed was too fast as he closed in on the two realms battlefield. It was as if he was treading on the river of time. Beneath his feet were time particles and dense immortal mist. His body was swift and violent like a resplendent bolt of lightning as he tore through the sky. One could see mysterious symbols flickering and Tao patterns interweaving beneath his feet. In his surroundings, it was as if there were 12 wings flapping. It was as if a Kuan Pong had spread its wings, soaring into the 9 heavens and overlooking the Yang realm. He would soon arrive at the battlefield. Of course, those weren't true Kuan Pong wings. They had long since been refined by Chu Feng. The 12-winged symbols returned to one and returned to the void. With a single thought, they could appear all over his body. Now, those symbols were born at the bottom of his feet, allowing him to move like lightning. It was as if he had pierced through the sky of history and was running through the years. The current 12-wing phenomenon was a natural Tao technique. Auspicious multicolored light blossomed outside his body and adorned his surroundings. It became a divine and transcendent contrast and turned into the background. This was too astonishing. In the past, he needed to borrow the power of domains to cross the void. But now, the ability he displayed made even the powerhouses pale in comparison. His speed surpassed the limit and could quickly rush from one province to the next. Chu Feng comprehended that when his speed broke through a critical point, dense time particles would appear and support his body, making him clear, powerful, and divine. That was why he could quickly rush from the Yang realm to the desolate border realm wall. Along the way, he cursed the dog several times. In order to provoke the Dog Emperor, he was throwing caution to the wind. Dog, squeak if you're still alive. Woof, it's you, little bastard. This emperor will swallow you alive. Even though the Dog Emperor was old, deaf, and its foundation was greatly damaged, it still knew who he was in the end. He was always being visualized in people's hearts, remembered, and talked about by others. How could a spiritual creature like it not feel it? It was so angry that it wanted nothing more than to stuff Chu Feng between its teeth. But in the end, both sides reached an agreement. The Dog Emperor compromised because it learned with astonishment that this youth was suspected to have participated in the Soul River battle and had attacked the sacrificial ground together. Not only was he in the same camp, but his roots were also unfathomable. Of course, Chu Feng had buried it on purpose. Otherwise, he was afraid that the dog would turn against him and even rob him of his stone jars and other treasures. Millions and millions of miles away, beyond the void of the Yang realm, the face of the corpse beside the dog monarch darkened. It was as if it had been struck by lightning. This unreliable youth seemed to be related to it by blood. 2F** King Unreliable. That little monster with the surname Chu is the cheap little father of the soul light. He split off. After the Dog Emperor understood what was going on, he opened his mouth wide and placed a large paw on the corpse's shoulder. He smiled brightly and said, "You have a father now." The zombie nearly exploded on the spot. At this moment, Chu Feng shouted at the zombie, "Don't kill an acquaintance. Let's talk among ourselves." Kill an acquaintance. The decayed corpse's face first turned black, then green. He really wanted to kill someone. Am I acquainted with you? Oh, I'm trying to avoid killing an acquaintance. Does this mean that you and I are related by blood? Do you want to be my father? It wasn't as simple as the father of the split souls. The zombie really wanted to sweep through the world. Millions and millions of strands of divine light soared into the sky. At this moment, it was simply shaking the heavens. Chu Feng explained and carried out all kinds of unclear narratives. His nonsensical swindling temporarily quelled the anger of the man and dog in the outer realm. They reluctantly agreed to protect his life at the critical moment, but they were very unwilling Very soon, Chu Feng also made contact with the Nine Daoi again and felt the sorrow of a sequence creature. Chu Feng didn't say much and only left a message. He might not return from this trip, so he asked the Nine Daoi to take care of him. A bolt of lightning streaked across the horizon, causing the heavens to crack. It dove into the two-realm battlefield and smashed onto the ground with a boom, creating a terrifying golden mushroom cloud. It was as if a weapon from a technological civilization had bloomed ferociously. Chu Feng had arrived. He brought with him lightning, flames, and intense energy radiation as he charged into the two-realm battlefield. He was afraid that something would happen to Yao Yao, so he didn't slow down in the slightest and rushed over frantically. What was this place? The battlefield between the two realms was overseen by true immortals and guarded by ultimate life forms. It was impossible for him to not attract attention even if he didn't want to. For a moment, everyone was dumbfounded. That was because Chu Feng hadn't left for long. On this battlefield, he had subdued several fallen immortal kings and killed reincarnation hunters before leaving calmly. He had originally run away, but in the blink of an eye, he had come back. One had to know that the reincarnation passage had appeared, and a large vermilion coffin was faintly discernible in the depths of the reincarnation path. There were also powerful hunters and even stronger experts on the side. How could he still dare to come? In addition, there were many people who were hostile to him here, such as the Yuan clan and the Human King Mo clan. The most terrifying one was naturally the martial madman. Chu Feng, why did you come back? Zhoshi was anxious. Not long ago, her eyes were filled with tears, and she was worried that something had happened to Chu Feng. That was because his figure had faded from her heart and had even completely disappeared. Now, seeing him return safely, she was afraid again. What if the mortal enemies here wanted to make a move against him? Chu Feng secretly told her not to worry. As long as he dared to appear, there would be no problems. Brother, do you have a death wish? Old Gu's face twitched. He felt that Chu Feng was courting death. Chu Feng gave a simple reply in order to avoid the people in his camp from overreacting and helping him out. That would lead to unnecessary danger. Then he saw the duel in the air. There was Yao Yao. It was really her. Many years had passed. Apart from becoming more powerful, she was as graceful as ever. Her beautiful appearance hadn't changed at all. She was still that Yao Yao. What shocked Chu Feng the most was that she was fighting against a martial madman. Back then, even he had to lower his head and call her fairy sister. Now, she was even more brilliant. No wonder she had the reputation of being number one under the starry skies in ancient times. Unfortunately, she had been delayed and perished in ancient times. Chu Feng's emotions surged. He couldn't forget the last time they parted. Yao Yao had used up the last of her strength to send him and the stone jar out of the abyss with blood dripping from the corner of her mouth. She herself had fallen into eternal darkness. That meant that she would die and her Tao would vanish. She would be swallowed by the darkness and would never return. Back then, Chu Feng was in despair and mourning. Every time he thought of that woman called Yao Yao, his heart would ache and he wished he could return to that moment. After so many years of separation, they reunited here. That woman in clothes whiter than snow could actually fight against a martial emperor. She was so breathtaking that he was deeply surprised and astonished. Of course, Chu Feng understood in that instant that it wasn't a final battle. The martial madman hadn't used his realm to oppress others. Even so, it was still a miracle. One had to know that the fierce man known as the martial emperor had achieved his Tao in prehistoric times. He was practically unrivaled in the Yang realm. His insight and experience weren't something others could imagine. The battle in the sky was exceptionally intense. It was a collision between an emperor technique and a martial emperor. Yao Yao's sleeves fluttered in the wind. She wasn't weak at all. On the contrary, although she was an ethereal woman, her attacks were quite tyrannical. She dared to use her bare hands to attack the martial madman. Her spotlessly white palms looked as sparkling and translucent as fine jade. However, the energy she unleashed was like a landslide and a tsunami. It shook the world and split the blue dome of heaven. Bang! As she waved her white hands, thousands of divine lotuses of the great Tao bloomed. Tens of thousands of sparkling petals fluttered in the air. They were wrapped in glaring energy and whistled as they drowned the martial madman. The martial madman's fist smashed through the rain of petals. With a boom, the light beam that erupted between the two tore apart the void and practically shook the sea of stars. Amidst the powerful energy and dazzling splendor, their bodies were resplendent and their hair fluttered in the wind. It was as though they were bathed in lightning as they attacked each other with great vigor. During this process, both of them used their trump cards. It's actually forward and reverse time. Even the fallen true immortal was moved. He was fairly shocked to see that Yao Yao's time runes actually contained forward and reverse time. As expected, when Yao Yao raised her white hands, her right hand formed the forward and reverse time. In a trance, a great river of time surged forward unstoppably. Everything in history was about to be struck into dust and obliterated. And in her left hand, there was a light flowing in the opposite direction. It was about to reverse time and throw the world into chaos. The fragments of time flowed backward in a dense and disorderly arrangement. This was too terrifying. Not only was she proficient in the scripture of time, but she could also deduce forward and reverse time. This made the martial madman's pupils contract in fear. But this was also what he needed. In order to comprehend that rotten scripture he had unearthed, the taboo chapter on the art of time, he needed to observe Yao Yao's emperor technique. It was an unrivaled, wondrous principle. Forward and reverse time blasted over at the same time, causing time and space to become unstable. Especially when the forward and reverse time intersected, it was as though the universe was being turned upside down and the history of the Yang realm was being reversed. Rumble. Countless time particles boiled and erupted here. They transformed into a sea of lava that surged and evaporated. The martial madman let out a low roar. He slashed through the ages and shook everyone's eardrums. He put his hands together in time, like a blade, split open the void and the great heaven and earth as he slashed at Yao Yao. This was also the power of time. It wreaked havoc and erupted with an incomparable aura. Boom! This place almost collapsed. The vault of heaven shattered like porcelain falling to the ground. That was time breaking through all matter, wanting to obliterate all obstructions. This was a confrontation between Yao Yao and the martial madman. An empty and bright woman was forcefully attacking a martial emperor. In the end, the river of time surged and the time particles swept through this place like a sea. Everyone was swept away by the true immortals and ultimate beings. Some people were swept by the light waves at the borders. In an instant, it seemed as though they had aged 100,000 years. Their hair turned snow white and then fell off. There were some people who were even stranger. Their robust used reverse time and returned to a child. They began babbling and learned to speak. It looked ridiculous, but it was terrifying to think deeply about it. That was the result of the two experts bursting forth with time. Both of them retreated. A corner of Yao Yao's sleeve fluttered down and exploded into light particles. Evidently, it had been cut down by the martial madman. The martial madman's bronze-colored body emitted a terrifying luster. A lock of his hair fell down and turned into flying ash, dissipating between heaven and earth. Everyone who saw this was dumbstruck. They were startled for that woman. Could she really contend with a martial emperor? The most terrifying thing was that the two's realms, vision, and experience were different. It was truly shocking to be able to fight to this stage. That woman was indeed peerless in the field of combat and possessed unparalleled aptitude. Creatures of a higher evolutionary rank would inevitably suffer a crushing defeat if they fought with a martial emperor in the same realm. Yao Yao and the martial madman temporarily stopped and retreated. They all looked at Chu Feng on the ground. This young man's arrival had also alarmed them. Under such circumstances, Chu Feng traversed the vast sky like a large star. He crashed to the ground at an extreme speed and naturally became the focus of attention. Many people were watching him. It's really unavoidable. No matter where I go, I'm always the center of attention. There's nothing I can do about it, said Chu Feng. It was just one sentence, but he had drawn enough hatred and made a group of people want to kill him. Yao Yao looked over. After so many years, she was actually reunited with him here. Chapter 1550. You had to admit that there were always people who stood out from the crowd and would invisibly become the focus of attention. Even in the boundless sea of people, people would still recognize them at a glance. They were different from the masses. This was the transcendent temperament, incomparable grace, and exceptional style. Unfortunately, these words weren't from other people's praise, but from Chu Feng himself. He was praising himself. That's right. He was praising himself. For a moment, the heaven and earth were quiet, and everyone shut their mouths. Even a shameless person like Old Gu was flabbergasted. He really wanted to ask Chu Feng, "Brother, are you shameless? Do you not want it any more?" If this was spoken by someone else, it would undoubtedly be the highest affirmation and praise for Chu Feng. However, the taste was completely different when he was reduced to selling melons himself. Originally, the distant Long Diu still wanted to join in on the liveliness, greet him, show off his face in front of a true immortal and ultimate creature. But now he directly turned his head around, as if he didn't know him. Even a strange dragon with thick skin like him felt like his skin was too thin, blushing from embarrassment. Chu Feng didn't pay attention to the others. He did things his own way, and he didn't care what others thought or thought. He lived for himself, and it wasn't that his mouth was cheap. It was only because everyone was staring at him that he spoke as he pleased. He looked at Yao Yao with joy in his heart, and also the lingering charm of the great sorrow from back then. He finally saw her. She had actually come out of the abyss that made people despair and come to him alive. "Yao Yao," he called out. However, Yao Yao's state was very special. She still remembered him, but some problems arose after she found her true body that had fallen into the abyss and merged with it. The current her hadn't completely returned, but in general, she hadn't forgotten Chu Feng. She smiled brilliantly, and the whole world brightened up. She was about to come over. However, at this moment, boundless killing intent engulfed the sky and the earth. If Chu Feng didn't have the protection of the stone jar, he might have been provoked by the killing intent and wouldn't be able to stand here. That was the martial madman. He had locked on a Chu Feng. How many people could survive being targeted by an ultimate entity? Chu Feng had come here to save Yao Yao. He was afraid that she would die in the hands of the martial emperor, but now he himself had fallen into a desperate situation. He was fearless and not worried, because he had a certain level of confidence in his heart. Chi. At this moment, Yao Yao's eyes revealed a divine radiance. Multicolored light gushed out from her right hand and condensed into an immortal sword. She pointed it straight at the space between the martial emperor's eyebrows and wanted to attack the peerless emperor from the Yang realm. However, the martial monarch was not suppressing his cultivation level. He was releasing his ultimate aura. He clasped his hands behind his back and didn't speak to Chu Feng. He looked down on him as if he were an ant. At his level, if he wanted to kill someone, he didn't need to be convicted, nor did he need a reason. He just had to kill. This was his domineering attitude of looking down on the world and ignoring the rules of the human world. This young man had been the enemy of his bloodline time and time again. He had even killed his descendant, Li Chintian, on 3 battlefields. It should be known that at that time, Li Chintian had used Emperor Wu's famous secret technique, the 7 Deaths technique, and had even activated the simplified version of the Scripture of Time, slaying 1,000 autumns. In the end, even the armor that Emperor Wu had worn when he was young was revealed by Li Chintian, but he was still defeated. That battle represented the defeat of Emperor Wu's bloodline. In addition, Chu Feng had also killed the martial madman's grand disciple, Lord Tai Wu. Now, after seeing this young man, the martial madman had no more misgivings. Runes circulated in the depths of his eyes as he was about to activate his killing intent and obliterate Chu Feng directly. Without a sound, the yellow-toothed old man behind Yao Yao stood in front of the martial monarch like a ghost and resisted the killing intent. Since he was Yao Yao's old friend, he naturally had to protect him. No one knew better than this yellow-toothed old man how terrifying the killing intent of a true immortal was. Chu Feng sighed. He was here to save Yao Yao, not to be saved. Otherwise, he wouldn't have offended the narrow-minded emperor of dogs for nothing if he didn't curse the dog and invite it to come out of seclusion without giving a chance to show its face. Moreover, in order to deal with the martial madman this time, he had successfully provoked his old son's anger and could bite back at him at any time. If he couldn't make use of that rotten corpse this time, wouldn't he have taken a risk for nothing? Thus, he wasn't afraid of the martial madman making a move. Don't stop him. Let him come. Let's see who can stand against me today. Chu Feng boasted shamelessly and challenged him to a fight. Someone laughed coldly as a crescent blade flew over. It spun and cut through the void to cut Chu Feng in half. Who do you think the martial monarch is? How dare you disrespect him? I'm going to teach you lawless juniors a lesson on behalf of the martial monarch. This person was from the Yuan clan and was naturally a mortal enemy of Chu Feng. He took advantage of this opportunity to find an excuse to teach Chu Feng a lesson on behalf of the martial monarch. But in reality, he was going to kill him on behalf of his own clan. Under such circumstances, the one who dared to make a move wasn't a weakling. It was a famous powerhouse from the Yuan clan who was infinitely close to the Great Grade. After some time, he might become a great primordial chaos expert. Not long ago, Chu Feng had killed a celestial venerable and even fought against an almighty expert. Everyone knew about this. However, this person from the Yuan clan was absolutely confident that Chu Feng couldn't deal with an evolver at the Great Origin Realm. Thus, he had come, controlling the Crescent Blade, to attack Chu Feng. Unfortunately, he had found the wrong opponent. In the eyes of outsiders, it hadn't been long since Chu Feng had left and returned. His strength couldn't have changed much. However, they didn't know that Chu Feng had just completed his super evolution with the help of the strange seed. Not only did he have 2 eternal venerables, but he had also almost broken through to the almighty realm and could enter at any time. Chu Feng took the initiative to meet the attack. 12 wings appeared on his back, emitting a dazzling golden light that shot into the sky like a Kuan Peng spreading its wings. The 12 wings covered the sky and split the earth, soaring 90,000 miles in an unstoppable manner. With a cracking sound, the crescent blade exploded on the spot. It was struck by a golden Kuan Peng wing and turned into hundreds of pieces. An almighty-level weapon had been easily destroyed by a young man. It was beyond everyone's imagination. Most importantly, the Kuan Peng wings spread out and released a sea of lightning that drowned the Yuan clan expert who was close to the Great Origin Realm. It was as if heavenly lightning had struck him violently. The wings didn't grow on Chu Feng's body. Instead, they appeared around him as the runes in his body circulated. They were the condensation of order. Rumble. A deafening sound rang out. The 12 Kuan Peng wings rotated, sending the incoming Yuan clan expert flying. Moreover, his body was blasted into pieces, directly smashing apart and almost exploding. "You dare to oppose me? I'm here to kill a martial monarch," shouted Chu Feng. Then he charged forward, and the Almighty was instantly blown to pieces, dying a violent death. These words could be considered arrogant, but his current display of power made many people's expressions change. Hadn't he just left not long ago? How could he kill an entity close to the Great Origin Realm just after returning? Chu Feng was bathed in the radiant energy. Even his hair was resplendent, as if it was burning. He stood in the air, looking disdainfully in all directions. He had dealt such a heavy blow because the Yuan clan and he were mortal enemies. Their enmity couldn't be resolved. Now that they had dared to bully him, he naturally wouldn't let them off. Apart from that, the Yuan clan was also the main culprit behind the destruction of the Yao Yao clan. Yao Yao's ancestor, heavenly venerable Yushang, was a descendant of the celestial emperor. But how pitiful! Almost all of his descendants had been wiped out. Only the Yao Yao bloodline had survived in the Lesser Een realm. Now, Chu Feng had the urge to tell Yao Yao that the archenemy of their race, the race with which they had a blood feud, was right here. However, Chu Feng held back. After all, he didn't know how strong Yao Yao's confidence was. Moreover, the Yuan clan had two unfathomable ultimate entities. It would be best if he didn't cause trouble for Yao Yao and told her in private. Not far away, the Yuan clan was shocked. A row of people came out, and there were even entities close to the ultimate level. They opened their eyes and stared at Chu Feng, ready to kill. With a swoosh, Yao Yao swooped down and blocked that powerful entity. Chu Feng sneered and turned into a beam of light. 12 Kunpeng wings flapped around him and appeared in all directions. He immediately charged toward the Yuan clan. Moreover, his eyes lit up along the way and transformed into two immortal swords that slashed forward. At the same time, it was as if he had 3 heads and 6 arms. His energy and aura rose sharply. Of course, this wasn't a real scene. It was the appearance of a strange phenomenon. The extra arms and heads were all formed from runes. Even so, his aura was flourishing and extremely powerful. He broke into the group of powerhouses at a speed that surpassed the limit. Bang, bang, bang. In just a split second, he killed 4 powerhouses. He used his divine wings to smash them, his fists to pierce them, and the immortal swords in his eyes to cut them into pieces. This was too shocking. Oomph. A cold and emotionless snort came out. The martial emperor moved. He was too powerful and pushed aside the yellow-toothed old man's obstruction. He pointed out with a finger and was about to kill Chu Feng. However, at this time, a divine temple appeared. Someone had arrived and blocked his path. Moreover, a black hand appeared behind the martial emperor. It was carrying a square seal and was about to smash the back of his head. The martial madman's expression changed. He evaded the divine temple and was seething with anger. He turned around to look at the black hand behind him and wanted to fight to the death. But the next moment, he was scared. He saw a short, old man in tattered, ancient clothes coming over on endless time particles. The old man stared at him and made him feel as if he was being locked on by a ferocious beast. He felt a chill run down his spine. Next, the martial madman trembled and turned around to flee. Everyone was shaken. Who was that short old man? How could he scare the martial emperor into fleeing? It was simply unimaginable. A book friend asked about the update. He braced himself and explained that the reason was the same. He had disappeared from the network some time ago to repair his body. Just like last year, his physical condition wasn't that great. Now that he was a little better, he immediately returned and worked hard to update the Holy Ground and write the concluding chapter. Chapter 1551. The martial madman had fled. Such a powerful and fierce person, who was known as the martial emperor in prehistoric times, had actually turned tail and fled after seeing an old man covered in rotting clothes. This was too shocking. For a moment, everyone was stunned and petrified. Then, they were horrified and felt as if they were about to suffocate. In everyone's impression, the martial madman was domineering, fierce, and invincible. Just hearing his name would make anyone tremble. This was a terrifying creature that could shake the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries. What happened now? Who was that short old man covered in old clothes? He fled as soon as he arrived. Chu Feng was also stunned. What was going on? The people he was waiting for hadn't even made a move. So why did 3 great experts suddenly appear? One of them was even more terrifying than the god of plagues, comparable to the Soul River and the most ancient monster in the underworld. Did he scare off the martial madman with his appearance? It wasn't the dog emperor, nor was it the rotten corpse. At the same time, it wasn't the 9 Dowie. The few of them hadn't shown themselves, but 3 other evil gods had come. This was too unexpected, so Chu Feng was dumbfounded and didn't know what to say for a moment. At the same time, some people also came back to their senses. The first thing they felt was numbness on their scalps, as they had a premonition that something big had happened. Some people even glanced at Chu Feng. This young man wasn't simple. He was just about to make a move against Chu Feng, but 3 creatures that could suppress the Yang realm had actually made their move. Among the 3 great saints, 2 of them could still be estimated and their origins could be guessed. In particular, Chu Feng had come into contact with 2 of them. The first person who drove the Divine Temple over was the one who came from the back mountain where the Ji clan resided when Chu Feng first came to the Yang realm, the Divine Temple Fairy. Sure enough, he vaguely saw 2 people standing in the hazy temple. One of them was as ethereal as a fairy, quite otherworldly and untainted by the flames of the mortal world. It was that fairy. The current her was completely different from before. She had completely awakened her past life and opened up her divine kingdom and heavenly kingdom on earth to absorb infinite power and strengthen her body. Chu Feng had an impression that when he was reincarnated from earth and returned to the world of the living, he seemed to have seen the imprint left by the fairy of the temple at the end of the ancient temple. This was a taboo existence that had left its name in the Samsara Palace with its memories. In reality, what the Divine Temple Fairy had awakened was not just a simple past life, but a complete understanding of the past. She had chased after several lifetimes and understood what she had gained from reincarnation. Beside the Divine Temple Fairy, there was a very sturdy person with a wide mouth and a big waist. She was actually also a woman. She was none other than Dong Qing, who had taken good care of Chu Feng in the past. At that time, he had changed his name to Ji-Dade. Chu Feng wished he could call her sister Dongqing on the spot. He was simply too intimate with her. The other expert was carrying a square seal and had attacked the martial madman from behind. Chu Feng didn't even need to think to know that it was Li Su. Even if this person's skills were unparalleled and he was invincible in the world, there were some habits that could not be changed. For example, he liked to hit people from behind, especially when he was facing the martial madman. He had committed more than 1 or 2 crimes. He had almost become a habitual offender. Therefore, after the martial madman was blocked and attacked, he did not have any extreme reaction when facing the Divine Temple Fairy. He was still quite arrogant and indifferent. However, when Li Sanlong appeared, the martial madman immediately exploded. He could no longer remain calm and turned around to fight him with all his might. It was as if he wanted to fight to the death. However, Chu Feng was a little surprised. Why was Li Daishu here? He was not called, especially since this guy did not have much contact with Chu Feng on the surface. It's over. I've wasted my energy. I've been praying in my heart and visualizing Li Dahe. I've even scolded him and said that I'm going to die before I invited him over. Just as I was about to attack the martial madman, someone intervened. Isn't this a waste of the emotions I've invested? It won't be so easy to call him next time. Old Gu was swinging his arms and muttering to himself. He looked as if he was deeply grieved. Everyone was dumbfounded when they heard this. He was the one who called him over. Everyone was shocked and a little afraid. This useless Gu Chenhai, who always claimed that his big brother was Li Su, could actually invite Li Daishu over at any time. The way some people looked at him suddenly changed. It was true that the kind of person who brought disaster would walk together with the kind of monster. It was no wonder that he became friends with Chu Feng. When these two became anxious, they could even attract a terrifying existence. Their roots were indeed unfathomable. Chu Feng was a little speechless. He more or less understood old Gu's feelings. It was just like how he scolded a dog, or how he bit the bullet to deceive an old son. He had clearly invited those two, but in the end, someone else did the work for him. He was especially unwilling. Why? Chu Feng felt that he had already taken a great risk. Not everyone could scold a dog. When the dog turned hostile and ruthlessly bit people, who could stop it? He was taking the risk of being bitten for several lifetimes. Moreover, after being targeted by that dog, it was a small matter if he didn't die, but it was likely that he wouldn't be able to rest for many lifetimes. The martial madman fled, and he fled in a hurry. He shattered the heaven and earth with a kick, pierced through the void, and escaped by riding the river of time. He was completely startled by the short old man. They had never seen such an anxious and flustered martial emperor. The performance of this strong man was too unimaginable, and it shocked and frightened everyone. Who is this short old man? Everyone wanted to know. Unexpectedly, just when everyone thought that the martial emperor had disappeared and would never be seen again, the river of time became chaotic. The heaven and earth turned upside down, the day turned into night, and all the rivers on the ground flowed towards the sky. The martial madman retreated and came back. It was as if there was an invisible hand pulling him back, forcibly restraining him, and making him walk backward from the broken void. Damn, this is simply frightening to death. Everyone was horrified and scared. Who was that? That was the martial madman who had shaken the ages, and he was actually in such a state. They could see that he was really walking backward, and his speed was incomparably fast. He had returned the same way he escaped. At this moment, not to mention the others, even the goddess of the divine temple was incomparably afraid. She steered the divine temple away from the clouds and retreated to the horizon, cautiously watching this place. The fallen true immortals and the decaying great cosmos-level beings were also terrified, and they couldn't help but flee backward, as if they were fleeing from the most terrifying ghost god they had seen for several eras. Even Li Su, the prehistoric Dark Hand, hesitated for a moment before leaving the place with the square seal. Of course, he didn't show himself at all. Instead, he stretched out a thick arm from the endless void, holding the black seal and slapping people. This was also the representation and embodiment of strength. His real body hadn't appeared, but a thick black hand dared to target the infamous martial emperor in the history of the Yang realm. Before Li Su retreated, his big black hand returned to Old Gu and gently touched his head a few times. Then he directly slapped him 3 times. Old Gu felt wronged, and he almost jumped up and cursed. "You're my big brother, so why did you slap the back of my head for no reason? I'll fight you to the death." However, the big black hand slapped him again, and it was very dissatisfied. It admonished him. What era was it now? The world was about to be destroyed, and an era was about to come to an end. How could he, Li Su, have the time to meddle in other people's business? He was in the middle of breaking through, so don't disturb him if there's nothing important. Old Gu immediately became listless. He had suffered a few slaps for nothing, but he couldn't say anything. At this time and place, it could be said that one could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were focused on the martial madman and the little old man. The martial emperor of a generation had actually been pulled back like a marionette. It truly shocked the world, and many people were frightened. Everyone stared at him, especially at the short old man who was cautiously peeking at him. What made people uneasy was that the more they looked at the old man, the more confused they felt. It was as if he would disappear with the wind at any time, as if he didn't exist in this world anymore. It was too strange. This creature was absolutely strange, and he was ridiculously powerful. He looked like he had just crawled out of a grave, and his body was indeed covered with soil. He gave off a very ancient feeling, as if he didn't belong to this era at all. The clothes on his body were very special. Upon closer inspection, they were woven and refined with materials that were difficult to find in the world. For example, the silk spun by the 9 revolutions, Ean's silkworm, and the metal silk thread extracted from the mother gold. But now, they had long rotted and were about to be destroyed. Those were definitely battle clothes that were rarely seen since ancient times, but they had rotted to the point of disappearing. Just how many years had they experienced? Although he was very short, and looked like a creature that had awakened from a grave, and even his face was covered with soil, making it hard to see his appearance clearly, he still shocked the world. At the same time, people also noticed that under the feet of the short old man, as well as around him, there were dense time particles, and the river of time surrounded him. Back then, you were the one who almost woke me up, weren't you? You had nothing better to do and randomly dug with a hammer, and you even chiseled through the hill I was sleeping on? The short old man spoke unhurriedly as he stared at the martial madman. The ancient language he spoke was very special. No one had heard of it before, and no one knew which era it belonged to. Even the prehistoric creatures didn't understand it, but everyone understood it in an instant. That was because there was a powerful divine will contained within it, and there was no obstruction in communication. In just a split second, some of the quick-witted old monsters were stunned. They quickly came to their senses and vaguely knew where he came from. Back then, the martial madman and Li Su had a great battle. They fought for a long time and used more than 800 divine abilities and secret arts. But in the end, the martial monarch was defeated and had to retreat. He wasn't willing to accept this. He believed that his innate talent was unrivaled, and as long as he had a peerless cultivation art to learn, he would be unrivaled throughout the ages. As such, he went to dig up famed mountains in search of lost arts. He wanted to obtain the supreme arts ranked in the top 3 throughout the ages and cultivate an invincible body. After that, there was a rumor that he had really dug up a supreme art from a famed mountain after narrowly escaping death, the scripture of time. It was said that the martial madman had really almost died at that time. His body was tattered and covered in blood. He escaped from several famed mountains and finally obtained something. Now, this matter was connected. The main character had come to capture the martial monarch. F***CK. Heavens! At this moment, not to mention others, even the fallen true immortals and the ultimate experts from the most ancient times felt their heads swell. They were completely scared out of their wits. It was very difficult to imagine which era this short old man was from and which era he belonged to. He was actually the master of the scripture of time. Digging up famed mountains was inauspicious, and it might provoke forbidden creatures. This kind of legend had long since existed in prehistoric times. As such, although there were many famed mountains in the Yang realm, not many great sects and sects dared to completely occupy them. Even the 10 great orthodoxies of the Yang realm, including the Buddhist race and the Hung race, had to pay the price of blood to occupy their current treasured mountains. Meanwhile, in the Yang realm, although there were some mountains that had been silent and declined for countless eras, no one had ever touched them. They didn't dare ascend them because they felt apprehensive. Now, the rumors had come true. Famed mountains were inauspicious and really couldn't be dug up. The old man was right. No wonder there's a saying that the Yang realm is a land of corpses, but it's also a land of the sun. It really isn't an empty legend. An old monster was horrified. He muttered inwardly as he thought of this rumor. You took away the unfinished and almost rotten manuscript that I left on the stone table in the belly of the mountain, right? Stealing it is fine, but why did you disturb my nap and disturb my dreams? The old man said softly. However, this was like a clap of thunder in everyone's ears. That was an ancient matter from prehistoric times, yet he thought it was just a small dream. It lasted until now, but just how long did he sleep for? Chapter 1552. The short old man's voice wasn't loud and seemed to be murmuring beside everyone's ears. However, those were the laws, the embodiment of the supreme order. It made everyone's soul light flourish, but their bodies were ice cold and they kept quiet out of fear. He was very ordinary and seemed to be covered in dirt, but he intimidated the heavens and the earth. Regardless of whether it was the fallen true immortals, the rotting cosmos-level entities, or the old ultimate experts, all of them felt like their scalps were about to explode as they felt an incomparable pressure. Especially at this moment, the fearless martial madman, the vicious man known as the Martial Emperor, had rapidly returned to the battlefield, adding to the strange atmosphere. What era is this? After a short nap, I don't know what year it is when I wake up. Don't be afraid, I won't hurt anyone. Just do what you need to do and don't worry about me. The short old man spoke in a friendly manner. Moreover, he seemed to have realized something. His murmuring was no longer the strongest Tao law reverberating and had returned to normal. Afterward, everyone felt that the soul light was no longer flourishing and was no longer shining mysteriously. Everything had returned to normal. At the same time, they had a feeling that he wasn't speaking empty words. He wasn't trying to intimidate them and didn't come with evil intentions. Just how many years had he slept for? Just a short nap, and he had transcended eras to the present? No one dared to reply to him. They were truly afraid of this untraceable entity. It was too frightening. Even if it was just his aura, it would most likely cause great karma. At the same time, the next moment, everyone felt somewhat alarmed. They had seen something. The martial madman's face was as pale as a sheet of paper. He was extremely afraid of this old man. Duo, the short old man lightly shouted and pointed forward with his right hand. A hazy light enveloped the martial emperor and completely enshrouded him. Since you've learned the scripture of time, it's also fate. I suddenly comprehended more in my sleep and have a complete chapter. Come with me, I'll pass it all to you. What kind of character was the martial madman? He was tyrannical and unrivaled. He had never submitted to anyone, so he naturally wouldn't give up without a fight. He fiercely resisted, but it was to no avail. He shrunk at a speed visible to the naked eye and turned from a bronze-colored vicious man, a ferocious man, and a martial emperor into a child. This shocked everyone. No one could believe their eyes. This old man had casually pointed at a martial monarch and turned him into a child. How could the current martial monarch still have the domineering attitude of soaring to the heavens and swallowing the universe? He became a young man with rosy lips and white teeth, who was even younger than Shufeng. When a few prehistoric old monsters saw this scene for the first time, seeing the great vicious individual turn into a child, they instinctively wanted to laugh, but in that instant, their entire bodies went ice cold from head to toe. This was just too horrifying. Even a martial monarch could not resist. They did not even have the ability to struggle. If it were them, they would most likely be in an even worse situation. The few fallen true immortals with the strongest postures also felt their scalps go numb. They felt as if their soul light was about to explode. What kind of mighty power was this? It was able to need a martial emperor at the peak of the true immortal realm as he wished. It was truly the most terrifying matter. Let's go. I'm lacking an apprentice. Since you woke me up from my nap, then it can be considered fate. Follow me back to the mountain and prepare to face the great calamity of a new era. The short old man spoke. With a shake of his hand, he tossed the short green robe over and was about to land on the martial madman's body. Crazy, everyone felt that this was too crazy. A martial monarch from the Yang realm was about to be taken away as an apprentice. The shock made everyone feel a little dizzy, and even their soul light was about to tremble. I'd rather die than be free, the martial madman roared. However, he was now in the form of a child, so no matter how one looked at him, he lacked some imposing manner. He had been enlightened by someone. From an emperor with a world-shaking spirit, he was reduced to a child. The corners of his eyes were about to split, and he was seething with anger. The martial madman let out a long cry. His whole body shone brilliantly as he deduced the sequence of time. After that, he grew at a speed visible to the naked eye and once again transformed into a robust young man. Oh, there's a knack. You combined that girl's technique in such a short time and deduced the rotten and incomplete parts of my scripture of time. Not simple. You have comprehension. The short old man nodded. At the same time, when he spoke again, he highly praised the Tao of time that Yao Yao had grasped. That must have come from the hands of the celestial emperor, as expected of a technique deduced by a truly outstanding person with great achievements. Admirable. How extraordinary. I can vaguely see the figure of a supreme being living in this technique. These words caused everyone who heard them to stare blankly. They were all deeply shocked. This was because they were at a different height, so the scenery they saw was also different. There was a supreme being living in this technique. Chi! The old man pointed once again. The martial madman's struggle was meaningless as he immediately turned into a Tao child. This time, he was very thorough and even wore a Taoist robe. He's a little cute. The strange dragon's mouth was cheap as he spoke sneakily. Moreover, he winked at Chu Feng and Old Gu from afar. This extremely daring dragon was the only one who dared to speak so recklessly. If he's not crazy, he's indeed a cute and beautiful child. Old Gu nodded seriously. He had been suppressed by the martial madman before. Old Goo was especially narrow-minded and naturally bore a grudge. Now, he couldn't help but have a cheap mouth. Everyone was speechless. There's no need to let it go. Seriously speaking, your lineage and my lineage might have crawled out from the same pit. So, you and I are fated. Come, silly child. The short old man spoke kindly and persuaded the martial madman to return to his seat. This shocked everyone. Crawled out from the same pit. Some people vaguely knew the roots of the martial madman's sect. They were horrified. They could even encounter it like this. Some fallen true immortals sighed. There were many famous mountains in the Yang realm, and some of them were indeed untouchable and unapproachable. Millions of miles away, beyond the Yang realm, in a certain void, the Dog Emperor was deep in thought. The rotten corpse patted his shoulder and said, "Do you know the main route? Is it related to the celestial emperor you follow? At the same time, he's the one who uses the scripture of time." The Dog Emperor had been guarding the celestial emperor's corpse with a broken bell. Its master was a powerhouse at the level of the originator of the time law. In addition, the celestial emperor lying in the bronze coffin had also performed the scripture of time. He started with a certain secret technique and gradually advanced to the highest level. This master is a little rotten. He might even be older than you and me, the Dog Emperor whispered. He couldn't see through this person's roots and origins. In front of the two-realm battlefield, the short old man whispered, "Everyone, sorry to disturb you. You can continue. You really don't need to mind me. Just pretend I didn't come." As he spoke, he walked toward the martial madman, wanted to lift him up and take him away. Chu Feng didn't say a word throughout the whole process. He watched quietly, but now his hair suddenly stood on end. The back of his head hurt, as if it was being pricked by needles. His soul light flickered violently. At once, the runes on his body flickered and performed. He had just finished metamorphosing not long ago, so all the divine abilities and the wonderful seven treasures technique he possessed were unleashed at the same time. With a boom, his blood chi surged and formed a large bell outside his body. It was inscribed with all kinds of runes, and he covered himself in the bell to protect himself. Almost at the same time, a blood-colored arrow shot over and hit the large bell. It let out an earth-shattering noise and almost penetrated the bell. Even the sky was blown apart. This arrow was accompanied by an incomparably astonishing energy. A mushroom cloud erupted, and it was enough to shoot down the sun and stars, shocking the world. Even the protective bell that was as strong as Chu Feng's, which condensed the essence and cultivation of his entire body, had disintegrated and shattered. It was conceivable that he would have been shot to death if he had been slightly slower. One had to know that Chu Feng had done everything he could. He had transformed all his divine abilities and wonderful techniques into runes and constructed a large bell. Even so, the body of the bell was still penetrated by someone. However, this was enough to buy him some time. In the instant the body of the bell disintegrated and exploded, he had already moved his body to the side and avoided the arrow that penetrated the back of his head. Reincarnation Road's transformation god arrow, someone said with a trembling voice. He was very frightened. The so-called transformation god arrow came from the reincarnation road and could melt anyone's divine soul. If it really hit, Chu Feng would die without a doubt. Even his true spirit would not be able to escape. At this moment, Chu Feng suddenly turned around and stared at a certain area. He was really angry. Not long ago, the martial madman had not been able to attack him. Li Su and the fairy from the divine temple had appeared and blocked the attack for him. Under such circumstances, there was still someone who dared to kill him and plot against him. Did this mean that they did not care and regarded him as an ant that could be killed at any time? This was really shocking courage and incomparably vicious. They had made up their minds to destroy him and would not give him the slightest chance to kill him. Fortunately, he had metamorphosed this time and became even stronger. His evolved spiritual senses were sharper and sublimated to the extreme, allowing him to sense fatal danger in advance. Otherwise, he might have died. At this moment, everyone was shocked and felt that it was inconceivable. One had to know that the short, old man who had created the scripture of time had not left yet. Although he had said not to care about him, in this kind of atmosphere, to actually dare to directly attack in front of him was too bold. As expected, the short old man was also a little surprised. He looked at a certain blurry void passage and said, "Someone from the reincarnation road." No wonder. Boom! Chu Feng charged over and did not say anything. This time, he directly raised his blade. It was the snow-white and incomparably sharp blade transformed from a seed. Light surged like a sea of stars, and also like millions of lightning bolts. He held the blade and slashed it forward. There was no confrontation and no argument. A bitter battle had begun. There were many powerhouses there, and there were a row of people who had walked out of the reincarnation path. In the end, Chu Feng closed in on them and started a massacre. Blood splashed everywhere and heads flew. This time, Chu Feng was really angry. The people on the reincarnation road really looked down on him too much. They didn't take him seriously and wanted to kill him casually. In addition, Evenly Black Hand and the fairy from the Divine Temple had not left, but they already attacked him. Did they think he would not be protected by others? Kill! Chu Feng was furious. He raised his blade and charged into the reincarnation road, killing his way inside. This time, everyone was dumbfounded. This youth surnamed Chu was really too demonic. He actually started a massacre in this kind of situation and wanted to steal the limelight of the creator of the scripture of time. Hiss! At this time, the short old man who had walked out from the famed mountains looked at the reincarnation road and actually inhaled a breath of cold air. That person! These two simple words similarly possessed an incomparable demonic nature. People immediately thought that the person he was talking about could only be that person. Chapter 1553. The short elder who had revived from the famed mountains and beaten the martial madman into a Tao child actually had this kind of expression and attitude. He was full of shock and had even mentioned that person. How could this not make everyone tremble? They were all greatly alarmed. I sensed that person's power. It's him. He spoke once again. His words were absolutely shocking and could even be said to be earth-shattering. He actually spoke of that person's energy fluctuations in the depths of reincarnation with such certainty. That person had left behind too many legends, but they were only circulated among the world's most powerful true immortals and ultimate creatures. Most other evolved beings didn't have the qualifications to know about it. This existence was too special. For some reason, the entire world had almost forgotten about him and couldn't retain any memories of him in their hearts. Now, someone was saying that he was in the depths of the reincarnation road. Even a martial emperor didn't struggle and temporarily became silent. A vicious person like him, who wasn't willing to be subdued, also wanted to know about that person's secrets. The people present naturally didn't forget that there was an expert who had charged in earlier. It was precisely the spear-wielding old monster from the first mountain, Jiudawi. 9 coffins, it's truly hair-raising. If they were separated and born in different eras, each of them would have the ability to reign supreme throughout the ages. How formidable! The time particles were dense and wrapped around the short elder. He actually sighed with emotion and further revealed the unfathomable deep waters of the reincarnation road. At this time, there was another person who was extremely ferocious and violent. That was Chu Feng. He charged into the reincarnation road alone and forcefully charged in. He raised his long blade and swept through the reincarnation road. It was truly too astonishing. He followed the indistinct reincarnation road and blocked the troops that were charging out. He took the initiative to slaughter them. Pooh! A great expert was beheaded. When the snow-white long blade streaked past, it illuminated the dusky reincarnation road and made everyone tremble in fear. This was too unyielding and fierce. This group of reincarnation hunters were all great experts. There wasn't a single weakling among them. This was a strengthened version of the law enforcer. They crossed the reincarnation road and were transported here. "You dare!" shouted a large silver rat. It was half the size of a human and all skin and bones, but its fur was shiny. It held a blood-colored spear and stabbed towards Chu Feng. Among the reincarnation hunters, there weren't many who had self-awareness and were relatively clear-headed. This big rat was clearly not ordinary. It even knew how to berate and intimidate. There were very few humanoid creatures in this team. There were half-human, half-snake monsters and three-headed, six-armed mechanical Buddhas. They were all very strange, ranging from flesh and blood creatures to metal life forms. However, there was one thing in common, and that was that they were all very strong. These were elite hunters, and one of the blonde creatures held a large bow in her hands. Just now, she was the one who shot the soul formation arrow. She had a very beautiful face, and her golden hair made her look like a sun goddess. Her flesh was rarely full, and she exuded a divine pressure. This was a creature that had almost become a great primordial chaos. The upper half of her body was that of a human, while the lower half was that of a scorpion. Her appearance was terrifying and strange. The corresponding realm of an almighty was primordial chaos, and this woman was close to the great primordial chaos. She was very tricky. Now, she drew her bow again and aimed at Chu Feng. Clang, clang, clang. Behind Chu Feng, 5 beams of divine light shot into the sky. That was the development of the wonderful 7 treasures technique. Currently, he had obtained 5 kinds of rare materials of heaven and earth, and he developed the rotation of the 5 lights. It was like 5 immortal swords being unsheathed, and it was like a peacock spreading its tail feathers to sweep through the universe. The soul formation arrow shot over again, piercing through the void with monstrous energy. It made the reincarnation road unstable and violently shook. This time, Chu Feng was prepared, so he was naturally fearless. The 5 beams of auspicious light behind him rushed forward like an immortal sword slashing the spring wind. It was ethereal, divine, and powerful. Amidst the clanging sounds, the glaring blood-colored light was blocked on the spot. Then it was sliced into pieces and exploded in the end. At the same time, Chu Feng's 3 heads and 6 arms appeared, and the 12 Kunpeng wings unfolded. In addition to his fiery eyes, he attacked the surrounding Almighty. This was simply like the arrival of a demon god. He was unstoppable and completely let go of himself. The last half of his heel was almost completely in the realm of Almighty, and his energy aura skyrocketed. A terrifying whirlwind formed around Chu Feng. It seemed to be able to stir up the starry sky and pull the mountains and rivers. It was extremely terrifying. He moved and closed. Bang! He sent a monster with a human head and a snake's body flying with one punch, and then it exploded in midair. How brutal and domineering was this? He had blown up an almighty with one punch, and the long saber in his other hand had directly slashed 2 almighty. The saber light flickered and swept through the world. It was reflected through the reincarnation road like a galaxy hanging upside down in the world. It was too dazzling. Even the pupils of the martial madman in the distance shrank. He believed that among his own disciples, if they were to fight at the same realm, they would be far inferior to this youth. But how long had this youth surnamed Chu cultivated? The martial emperor was also asking himself if he could suppress this demon Chu Feng when he was young. Clang! A purple spear stabbed over, but in the end, Chu Feng blocked it with a finger. Then, he suddenly exerted force and broke the spear with a crack. He was circulating the robbery induction breathing technique. His mouth and nose were full of white mist, and when he opened his mouth, a golden energy gushed out. It turned into runes and turned into special sound waves that whistled forward. With a bang, an almighty exploded. It was equivalent to being roared to death by Chu Feng. Half of the body of another almighty was also shattered by the golden rune energy. It was tattered, and his whole body was sent flying. It seemed that he was on the verge of death. It was too brutal. Everyone was astonished. Why was this demon Chu Feng, who had left not long ago, so much stronger than before. Boom! It was another punch, and this time it was the explosion of the ultimate fist seal. Chu Feng hit until the blurry reincarnation path was almost broken. He attacked the hunter and killed the big silver rat. The Almighty's corpse was shattered into pieces. It was a very terrifying scene. The long saber in his hand swept across and immediately forced a group of people to retreat. Along the way, he cut off another head. The saber light was like a tsunami crashing against the shore, shaking the entire space. With a boom, Chu Feng rushed over like a bolt of lightning and locked onto the golden-haired woman with the big bow. This was an expert infinitely close to the great origin chaos realm. In an instant, there were tens of thousands of saber lights as Chu Feng continuously slashed and split the sky. The reincarnation path that was illuminated here was corroded and about to disintegrate. Obviously, this woman was not simple. She was very powerful. After shooting a few arrows, she quickly took out dozens of flying swords and turned them into a sword rain to stop Chu Feng. The other Almighties attacked again, surrounding him in a formation. Dao patterns were densely packed, and they were all nomological runes. They wanted to refine him together. What a fierce person. I've never seen such a brutal youth who dares to enter the reincarnation path and kill almighty hunters. He's so proactive and domineering. Back when Li Sanlong was dissatisfied with the reincarnation hunters, he only secretly killed some of them, but didn't leave any evidence. This youth, on the other hand, doesn't rest until he's dead in front of everyone. He's killing hunters. His courage is praiseworthy. Shoo, lower your voice. The Blackhand might not have gone far. Don't talk about him, or the back of your head will be smashed. Without a doubt, Chu Feng was the focus of everyone's attention. Even the short elder, the creator of the time scripture from the famed mountain, had been robbed of his limelight. Chu Feng was furious. He had been targeted by the beings of the reincarnation path again and again. They wanted to eliminate him. Since that was the case, what else did he not dare to do? He would just face them head-on and kill them. At this time, two more people appeared noiselessly in the two-realm battlefield. Only a few people noticed them, such as the short elder from the famed mountain. These two could be considered the two strongest immortals of the Yuan race in the Yang realm. One was an ultimate ancestor who had lived for an incomparably long time, and the other was a peerless expert who had become a great universe-level entity in recent times. Both had great origins. They silently saluted the short elder. Even the two strongest immortals of the Yuan race didn't dare show any disrespect. The short elder nodded and didn't say anything. He stared at the depths of the reincarnation path and saw the 9 coffins. He also saw many other things and was studying them. Ancestor. The people of the Yuan race were astonished, delighted, and shaken. The Yuan race's strongest combat power had actually personally descended. Immediately, someone reported to the two that an outstanding character from their race, who might have become a great origin realm expert, had been killed. They looked toward Chu Feng. Ancestor. How about I go and kill him? Someone asked in a low voice. This was a top character from the Yuan race who was close to the ultimate realm. He had wanted to attack not long ago, but had been stopped by Yao Yao. Now that he saw the two immortals arrive, he was prepared to kill Chu Feng no matter what. That was because, at present, the youth's potential was too great. He would certainly become a great threat in the future. How old was Chu Feng? He could already fight a great origin realm entity. Just kill him. The Yuan race expert who had achieved Dao in recent times and was at the great universe level spoke for the first time. He had the appearance of a middle-aged man. His hair was thick, and his face was incomparably cold. His eyes were like an ice house devoid of any emotion. After speaking, he didn't want others to attack. Instead, he wanted to kill Chu Feng himself. He extended a finger and was about to point at the center of the reincarnation path. He was a great universe-level entity, so it was too easy for him to kill powerhouses. If he really attacked, even a great origin realm expert wouldn't be able to stop him. This person was very powerful and frightening. For a moment, his entire body was sparkling and translucent as energy surged along his finger. I Damn your grandpa. At this time, the old man cried out in alarm and couldn't help but curse his grandpa. That was because he discovered that Li Dahe wasn't here. He didn't know where he had retreated to. Could it be that he had left? How could he block this attack? At the same time, the fairy from the divine temple was on the horizon. She was afraid of the old man who had created the scripture of time. If she wasn't close, she probably wouldn't be able to block this fatal attack. In a flash, someone moved. Yao Yao made her move. Positive and negative temporal sequences merged together to form a yin and yang diagram. Then, the positive and negative temporal sequences collided and exploded. Her attack shocked everyone. She wasn't an ultimate entity, but this earth-shattering attack blocked the Yuan race's rotten great universe entity. In the distance, Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He felt a sense of danger and glanced over to see that Yao Yao had actually helped him block the attack. It was the Yuan race again. They were like ghosts that wouldn't go away and had harmed him time and time again. At the same time, he couldn't help but curse the dog in his heart. It was too unreliable. He also wanted to curse that old son of his for being so unscrupulous. Dog, my son. Chu Feng's hair stood on end. He couldn't help but visualize the forms of the two entities and curse their mothers. In the outer realm, the two entities were dumbfounded. They didn't react to someone cursing them. Moments later, they still hadn't come back to their senses because they were also staring at the depths of reincarnation. They could feel the supreme aura of that peerless being's energy. Under such circumstances, they didn't pay attention to Chu Feng. They were studying the mysteries in the depths of reincarnation. Is this the reincarnation path that person dug out from the netherworld back then? Why do I feel like he left something behind? His own reincarnation won't take root here, will it? There's a saying in this world that person might enter reincarnation with his own body. He wants to deduce something and enter a certain place to kill the enemy. He can't be here, right? The man and the dog were stunned. They were a bit stupefied. There were 9 coffins there, and one of them was that person's son. 9 Dowie had run inside, and now even this man and dog knew about it. How could they not think about it? That person's backyard? At this moment, the short old man who had recovered from the famed mountains muttered to himself. His pupils contracted as though he had sensed something, and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Not many people in the two-realm battlefield heard what they said. Now, everyone's gazes were focused on Yao Yao and that rotten cosmos-level expert. The former had blocked one of the 2 Yuan immortals just like that. This was simply too shocking and shocking. Obviously, Yao Yao's attack wasn't normal. She was resisting with all her might. Even so, killing an immortal this time was enough to shock the world. At this moment, the yellow-toothed old man stepped forward and blocked in front. On the path of reincarnation, Chu Feng unleashed a massacre. His entire body was covered in blood. He had killed everyone just now, and even that golden-haired woman was slaughtered by him. A beautiful head flew out from the front of the snow-white longsword, and even her soul light was annihilated along with it. His heart was in turmoil. He was anxious and apprehensive. He saw Yao Yao attack, and also saw that rotten cosmos-level entity. Chu Feng knew that one of the 2 Yuan immortals was Yao Yao's great enemy. This Yuan expert, who had attained enlightenment in recent times and became a rotten cosmos-level expert, was the one who had killed Yao Yao's ancestor. Back then, he had planted the mother gold in Yao Yao's grandfather's body. Celestial Venerable Yushang's whole life of sorrow was caused by this person. Now this rotten cosmos-level entity had come. He still didn't know that this stunning woman who dared to kill immortals was Yushang's descendant. Otherwise, he would have gone all out to kill her. That person, did he act out everything here? I can feel his sorrow and happiness. He came here. Is he still here? 9 Dowie murmured in the depths of reincarnation. At the same time, there was a cold glint in his eyes as he stared at the stronger hunter in the depths of the path of reincarnation. Who are you? Why are you entrenched here? How dare you touch such boundless karma? Very soon, he also noticed the outside world. 2 cold beams shot out from his eyes as he said, Yuan tribe, you've stretched your hands too far. Then he shouted, "Don't you know that Chu Feng is a disciple in name of the first mountain? It's fine if the younger generation fights, but I don't want to waste the opportunity. Which old bastard is tired of living? Try attacking again. I'll chop off your dog claws." Woof. In the outer realm, the dog emperor couldn't help but growl and bare his teeth. That person's backyard. Is it really here? At this moment, the short old man who had just recovered was about to enter the depths of the path of reincarnation. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.